Gather round, snakes. It's time for part 5 of the Gods of Eden. You're listening to Snake Bros.
Snake Bros! And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, angels and demons and monsters and serpents, to Brothers of the Serpent podcast, coming to you not live from the 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of science, the moon, nestled amongst the dusty bones of an ancient seabed high atop the Airways Plateau. The Watcher has just posted a picture up here of the high contrast moon image that just came out recently. I guess an amateur astronomer was spent a lot of time taking pictures of the parts of the moon that were in high contrast at the time due to its relationship to the sun, and then he made a collage of all those images so it comes out in high, like everything is in high relief. It's a beautiful picture.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
Man, look at that. I mean, you can see the peaks inside those craters.
Yeah.
So
the central peaks.
God, it's awesome.
Yep. Look at Tycho. God, what was that thing? Yeah,
man, go check it out. Where did you get this? Why? Welcome to the show, Watcher.
Yeah, Watcher. Come on and tell us about this picture.
Secret space station.
I sent you guys the link to the article also.
Send it to History Shift.
In the chat window. Okay, will do. I'll get the image over to him also.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's pretty crazy, right? I mean, it just blows my freaking mind.
And the colors pop out too. That's really cool. You can see
how like smooth and flat these dark surfaces are.
Yeah.
What do they call these?
The mares.
Mares. Yeah.
Yep. The seas.
So cool.
But they're basically lava plains, so nobody really knows why.
We got some interesting stuff on the moon coming up too. So
that's right.
Yeah.
Did you see that the smiley face is going to happen soon or whatever?
Yeah.
On the moon?
No, like Jupiter and Venus are going to be above the crescent. It's going to look like a smiley face.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah.
We need to somehow fly some planes up there that says LOL or something next
right
to
underneath it. Yeah. Maybe it'll have a circle around it that night.
Oh,
it will actually be a freaking emoji in the sky.
Well, I want to be there to see it. I want to know the date whenever we can get the date.
Yeah, it's supposed to happen this month. I don't remember the exact date, but like Venus has been real bright recently, and like Jupiter's going to be cruising up closer, and then they're going to be right over top of the crescent moon.
Oh, Jupiter's
it'll be like
cruising up.
It'll
They're
be a
gonna have
legit
little special date night.
God grinning at us,
Okay.
from the skies. All right, let's go ahead and do space weather news. From spaceweather.com, ETA Aquarid Meteor Update. The ETA Aquarid meteor shower caused by dust from Halley's Comet is still active on May 6th, but it appears to be subsiding. Data from the International Meteor Organization suggests that the shower peaked on May 4th with the maximum rates at near 45 per hour. Glare from the waxing full moon will make the display difficult to see for the next few nights. Practically speaking, for casual sky watchers, the show is over. But what happened to Comet Swan? This week, an unexpected outburst from Comet Swan amazed observers in the southern hemisphere who could actually see the comet brighten with their unaided eyes. What happened? It might have fragmented, exposing bright clouds of dusty gas to the sun. Certainly, the comet's tail looks like debris from an explosion, and they have an actual, like a little short movie here of the tail.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, see the you can see the dust moving in the tail.
Yeah.
But Carl Batams of the Naval Research Lab in Washington, D.C. does not think so. He says outbursts do not necessarily imply fragmentation, and ground-based images are not yet showing evidence of a breakup, he says. This could just be a particularly feisty and volatile comet. Comet Swan was discovered on April 11th when Australian amateur astronomer Michael Matazzo noticed a curious bloom in images from Soho's Swan camera. Swan surveys the solar system for hydrogen gas, and it caught the comet making a sudden hydrogen dump. And that might have been Comet Swan's first outburst. A second outburst starting in late April turned Swan into a naked eye object. Fresh comets often behave this way, cracking, fracturing, and exposing veins of volatile material as they approach the sun for the first time. Comet Swan is just such an object. It has a long orbit, which suggests it has never been here before. Sunlight is touching its surface for the first time with unpredictable results. More outbursts could be in the offing. Dates of special interest include May 12th, when the comet passes by Earth at 0.56 AU. So that's about half the distance from Earth to the sun. And May 27th, when the comet slingshots past the sun not far from the orbit of Mercury. Observers in the southern hemisphere will have a front row seat for whatever happens. It would not surprise me at all to see another outburst, maybe several, in the coming weeks as it closes in on the sun later this month, says Batams. So stay tuned.
Yeah, so the Watcher's saying May 13th or the 12th.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's become a naked eye object because of its recent outbursts. Current conditions, solar wind speed 307.1 kilometers per second, and the density is a very low 3.5 protons per cubic centimeter. Sunspot days, spotless days, 4. Because we had that short sunspot a couple of days ago. But 2020 total, still 75% spotless days.
Right on.
Yep.
And from space.com, the moon is not dead. Ridges on the lunar surface show signs of recent tectonic activity. There's an assumption that the moon is long dead, but we keep finding that this is not the case. The moon isn't dead after all. Newly discovered ridges on the moon's surface are leading scientists to think that the moon might have an active tectonic system. Using data from NASA's Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, researchers have discovered a number of ridges with exposed bedrock free of lunar regolith, which is the powdery lunar soil. So it is free of lunar regolith spread across the moon's near-side surface. These ridges speckled with boulders could be evidence that not too long ago, tectonic activity broke apart the moon's surface. While most of the moon's surface is covered in lunar regolith, there are a few rare patches of this exposed bedrock. But because regolith builds up quickly on the surface, there must be something creating these ridges with exposed bedrock on the moon. Peter Schultz, a professor in Brown University's Department of Earth, Environmental and Planetary Sciences and co-author of the new study, describes the findings in a statement. While ridges with exposed bedrock have been seen before, they could be explained by evidence showing that lava once flowed there. Its weight and movement creating the ridges, Schultz added. But in this new study, ridges have been found that can't be explained by ancient volcanic activity and seem to be related to more recent tectonic activity. Quote, the distribution that we found here begs for a different explanation. There's this assumption that the moon is long dead, but we keep finding that it's not the case. End quote. To make these observations, the team, led by Adamas Valentinus, a graduate student at the University of Bern in Switzerland, who conducted this research while a visiting student at Brown, used the LRO's Diviner instrument, which measures the temperature on the moon's surface. Diviner data allowed them to determine what types of rocks and what types of surfaces lay in specific areas, because areas covered in lunar regolith tend to be colder than exposed areas of bedrock free of regolith. Using these observations, the team was able to spot 500 patches of exposed bedrock on narrow ridges across the moon's surface near the lunar maria, right?
Yeah.
Which are the large, dark patches on the moon. Valentinus and Schultz mapped out all of these exposed ridges, and it turns out that they line up perfectly with ancient cracks in the moon's crust spotted by NASA's Grail mission in 2014.
The Grail?
The Grail! Magma once flowed through these cracks to the moon's surface. It's almost a one-to-one correlation, Schultz said. That makes us think that what we're seeing is an ongoing process driven by things happening on the moon's interior, in the moon's interior. Schultz and Valentinus suggest that what they've found is an active near-side tectonic system, or ANTS for short. They found ants on the moon. Within this system, they suggest that the ridges that sit above the ancient cracks found by Grail are still today moving upward, with their surface cracking and allowing regolith to fall into cracks, leaving the bedrock exposed. They think that ants may have begun billions of years ago when the moon experienced a significant impact, because regolith usually covers the surface quickly. But such activity could still be going on today. continuously pushing the ridges up, cracking them, and leaving the bedrock exposed, the researchers said. Giant impacts have long-lasting effects. The moon has a long memory. What we're seeing on the surface today is testimony to its long memory and secrets it still holds, Schultz said. The new study, which was published in April 13th in the journal Geology, isn't the only evidence for recent tectonic activity for the moon. For example, seismometers installed on the lunar surface by Apollo astronauts in the late 1960s and early 70s picked up numerous quakes, which scientists have traced to the moon's long-term cooling. This cooling causes shrinkage, which in turn causes the brittle lunar crust to crack and shake. So that's from space.com, and they have an image here that pretty much it's showing the lunar surface, and the Maria, the dark patches, almost are completely encircled
by
in these exposed ridges.
Yeah. That's
Who
interesting.
keeps trying to kill the moon off? Who's
bombing it?
Who is killing the moon?
who's saying that it's always dead?
Well, it's dead tectonically speaking, or
Yeah.
what
They think that it doesn't have
volcanically
it
dead.
doesn't have a hot core,
Okay.
so it's completely cooled. They think. But
Some
yeah,
people see dead moons.
if you you can get on Google Moon, go to Google Earth and change it to the moon, and you can look at some of the lunar orbiter camera images, which are very high quality and up close. And of course, since the moon doesn't have an atmosphere to look through, there's less distortion from this moon satellite taking pictures. So they're very clear images.
Okay.
And you can find a lot of evidence of activity, I guess, ground movement. Like they're classic, like you'll see this trail of pockmarks, of irregular pockmarks, small ones, right? They're not craters.
Yeah.
But they're little pockmarks or whatever, and you follow the trail, and then you find a boulder at the end of it, like the thing rolled down a hill or something,
Okay.
leaving marks in the dust.
Okay.
Now, of course, like he said, the moon has a long memory, meaning it doesn't have an atmosphere, so anything you leave in the dust will stay there for a long time. So there's no telling how long ago that boulder rolled down the hill, but probably an impact or something, or a little earthquake happens, and then the thing rolls down the hill it's on.
But also they're talking about the regolith, like the buildup of the regolith, right?
Is fast.
Is fairly fast, so they can look at this stuff and say, well, it couldn't have been that long ago.
Right.
Based on the fact that it's not covered in dust.
Yeah.
Or maybe some aliens just dropped by.
Because there's a constant there is
Vacuumed it up.
Left.
there is also this constant infall of just dust and debris from space.
Yeah.
It's just raining down on the moon all the time.
Yep.
Okay.
So I got one more story here from livescience.com. A long lost type of bullshit may resolve the biggest disagreement in physics.
Of course.
Here we go.
Hot and cold dark matter on tap, ladies and gentlemen. It's a long lost type of dark matter.
Oh.
So they're like, okay, our entire model does make sense because everything's expanding at rates that don't match with our theories.
Yeah.
So what if there was this unknown other type of dark matter that was like even warmer than the other dark matter that we can't see and don't know if it actually exists? But if that was also there, but then vanished early on,
Oh, yeah.
that would explain not exactly what's going on, but
It would be closer to observations.
giving us like some idea that we can talk about that makes people think that maybe we've got something.
That's pretty good. Kyle.
Livescience.com.
Oh, man. More making up of particles.
Warm dark matter.
Warm dark matter. Warm, what are they called? Warm WIMPs. Or the WIMPs, the weakly interacting massy particles that
Yeah.
they thought was dark matter WIMPs. Warm WIMPs.
Sterile neutrinos, people. They cannot have sex. Well, they can't have children of other particles. They're
right.
completely sterile. They're dark and they're cold. But there's also hot dark matter, and now maybe there's just warm dark matter. That could be the answer.
All right, I have one from phys.org. This is physics website. Physics's website.
Yeah.
Researcher, and I don't know why this is on Phys, but researchers dig into case of geologic amnesia. This was posted on April 27th of 2020.
Who's the writer?
By Daniel Strain from the University of Colorado at Boulder. Dude knows about rocks. A team of geologists led by the University of Colorado Boulder is digging into what may be Earth's most famous case of geologic amnesia. Researchers have spotted that phenomenon called the Great Unconformity at sites around North America, including in the Grand Canyon and at the base of Pikes Peak in Colorado. There lie sites of missing time, where relatively young rocks dating back to about 550 million years sit right on top of much more ancient stones that are in some cases more than 3 billion years old. So there's this problem of like they're dating this layer to 3 billion years old, and then right on top of it, it dates to 550. And so they're like, oh, there's all this missing time.
Wait. What's the writer's name? Strain?
Daniel Strain. Yes, of course. In other words, says the article, a huge chunk of geologic history has vanished from in between.
It's warm geologic history.
Right. Maybe if there was, and they do that in this article. Researchers have long seen this as a fundamental boundary in geologic history, says Rebecca Flowers, an associate professor in the Department of Geological Sciences. For a study published today in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, she and her colleagues drew upon a technique known as thermochronology to take a fresh look at that. See, it's warm rocks. To take a fresh look at that fundamental boundary. They found that the Great Unconformity might not be the result of a single catastrophic event in the planet's past, of course.
Of course not.
It's not. Like many scientists thought, instead, a series of smaller calamities may have triggered many different unconformities around the world. Classic uniformitarians. The results could help scientists better understand the flourishing of complex life that occurred not long after that tumult settled down. About 540 years ago in an era called the Cambrian explosion. Right, so the rocks, the quote-unquote young rocks that are on top date right to the Cambrian explosion.
Right.
There's a lot of the geological record that is missing, Flowers said. But just because it's missing doesn't mean that this history is simple, unquote. So Pikes Peak, to study that less than simple history, Flowers and her colleagues, so they're like, let's assume it's not simple. Right, and let's make up a whole bunch of bullshit. Her colleagues turned to Pikes Peak. In a granite outcrop near the mountain town of Manitou Springs, Manitou, geologists can find one of the clearest cases of the Great Unconformity. Follow the strata down. You will see young rocks less than 510 million years old and older basement rocks dating back to about 1 billion years, but you will not find anything in between. So that's 500 million years missing. And there it is. There's a picture of the Great Unconformity. So the red stuff is the old shit and the stuff on top is much younger.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
That's called the Great Unconformity. Geologists know that something must have happened in the past to erase all that history, Flowers said, but what that was and when exactly it happened are still a mystery. Only recently have we had the ability to reach far enough back in time to start filling in that gap, she says. Rocks, Flowers said, carry a kind of memory. By probing the particular atoms that have been locked up inside geological samples, savvy scientists can create a heat-based history of those rocks, essentially how hot or cold the sample was at various points in its lifetime. Using that method, the researchers discovered that the Pikes Peak basement rocks were brought to the surface of the planet about 700 million years ago. For Flowers' team, finding that was a key. When all that rock rose to the surface, she explained, it would have suddenly been at the mercy of wind, snow, and other extremes, and those elements could have led to erosion, a lot of erosion, essentially wiping the geological history of the region clean. Imagine shaking an Etch-a-Sketch, but on a monumental level. Earth is an active place, Flowers said. There used to be a lot more rock sitting on top of Mount Everest, for example, but they've been eroded away and transported elsewhere by streams. But what lifted those rocks up in the first place? Flowers and her colleagues think it has something to do with Rodinia. That's the name of a massive supercontinent, think Pangea, but much older, that formed at Earth's surface roughly 1 billion years ago. At the edges of Rodinia, where you have continents colliding, you'd see these mountain belts like the Himalayas begin to form, Flowers said. That could have caused large amounts of erosion. The researchers also realized something else. The Great Unconformity might not have been so great in the first place. Of course it wasn't. As Rodinia crashed together and then pulled apart over hundreds of millions of years, all of that geological activity may have caused many separate cases of memory loss around the world, not just one. We're left with a feature that looks similar across the world when, in fact, there may have been multiple great unconformities, plural, Flowers said. We may need to change our language if we want to think about the great unconformity as being more complicated, forming at different times in different locations and for different reasons. So this is something to ponder next time you go hiking on Pikes Peak.
That's great.
Yeah, more Skirptard stuff.
Man, my news feed's been just full of that kind of stuff. Like
Yeah.
that's what I've been calling boring stories. They're
Right.
not actually boring,
Right.
but there's like lots of Skirptard stuff in there. I'm
Yeah.
just like, okay.
Yeah.
Like one of them is they're measuring how much the sea levels are rising like in this particular place.
Oh yeah.
But not anywhere else.
Nowhere else.
Right? Just like are you considering isostasy at all?
Yeah.
You know?
It's not used to see, it's isostasy.
Yes.
Yeah. Not a change in the water column. Okay. Let's get to some emails here.
I love emails.
Yeah, you love the emails. Let me do the, we've got reviews first. We got new reviews here.
Thanks everybody.
Yeah.
For the reviews.
Good reviews. So you can go to Apple Podcasts and give us reviews, and that's what so this one's real short and simple. It says, so good, 5 stars. I am loving this pod.
All right.
From Andrew from New Zealand.
Hey.
30% brain expansion. 5 stars. The only podcast which I don't skip the interlude music. Skirptards, beware. From
Warm and fuzzy.
Yeah, from Seaway Brown from the U.S. And then Laura left us one. Should I read this one that you left?
You can if you want. I just was doing my due diligence. Because last time y'all
We had a rag on. We're like, hey, what is going on here?
So it was on my birthday. I got super warm and sentimental.
Yeah, it's pretty sentimental.
Put it out there. So
It says it's called My Home, My Heart. I could not have asked for a better brother-in-law. Russ, your mission here is perfect. Thank you for your dedication and enthusiasm. I'm constantly learning from you and happy to do so. Now on to Kyle, my love. Your audio skills still blow me away every day. The quality of production for this podcast is amazing. The music makes me dance every time. I appreciate your dedication to keeping your schedule balanced so that you can spend quality time with your family while still pursuing your passion. Your brotherly relationship warms my heart, guys. I thoroughly enjoy spending time with y'all in the cube and out.
Wow,
It's a fantastic review.
Warm and fuzzy.
5 stars.
5 freaking stars.
Everybody was like,
Yes, it's all one star. This one's called The Digital Esoteric Path, 5 stars. Joe Rogan Experience, to Graham Hancock, to Randall Carlson, to Snakes. I told you, lots of people have that path.
crazy
The
that
Digital
you really
Esoteric
do.
Path
That's freaking awesome.
from Cubby from the United States. All right, here's this one. This is called Speed It Up for We ADHD Snakes. 5 stars. Still, it's a 5-star review, but it says, this grandma loves y'all garter snake lads and recent lass. Yet at times must admit a bit of an adder poison snake focus would help. AKA, boys, please get to the topic at hand. Space Bro News is just, and reviews are a plus, but getting to the subject within the first hour is, well, a must. Tough love moment. Really? An hour of snasturbation. AKA, get to the point before this gal's in a coma. By the way, no offense intended. I appreciate IQ over 100. From Jen from US.
Can I make a suggestion?
Hey, I worry about.
Listen, I want to respond to her,
Okay.
but let's think about it. Let's do it in the third segment.
Oh, that's a good point. You're right.
I'll make my suggestion then.
Yeah, you know, Jen, we just sometimes we have more stuff to talk about than normal, and we can't get to it all in one segment. So sorry about that.
Yeah, sometimes I worry about that. You know, we go.
Yeah, we
an
do
hour,
think about it. Yeah,
and I'm just like, but hey, we've got
all the time in the world.
Yeah, we're just gonna keep doing this.
Yeah.
So thanks for listening.
Yeah, and thanks for the review. Really appreciate
Or
it.
you can just start halfway through.
Yeah, well, people don't know when we start the main topic.
Yeah,
If it's
that's
after
true.
the first segment or if it's after the second segment, and is it an hour or is it 30 minutes? We never get it right.
But we do hear you, and I've heard the guys talk about this before when we're
Yeah.
not on, you know, like, was that too much
Yeah. Are we taking too
And
much
then
time?
Eventually, we're all just like, nah, it's good. Let's just keep going.
Right, because I mean, I guess the way I look at it is you can, if you want, just wait, and then you can come back in the future and you can just listen to all the content you want all in a row if you're ADHD about it.
But we got to give love back to the love that's coming to us.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, so emails. This is from John Doe. I don't think I'm doxing this person. It's called Electric Universe ? I am a new listener. I have been enjoying some old episodes. It's nice to hear someone truly interested in this subject and basically just having a conversation when presenting the info. One of the episodes in which you talked with Randall, you guys mentioned the ancient myths of the mother goddess that turned evil. I am curious if you guys are familiar with the work of David Talbot and the Thunderbolts Project. Yes. They dive very deeply into the subject of ancient civilizations and myths while studying and promoting a new science model that includes electricity as one of the leading forces in cosmology as opposed to gravity. Yep. Very basically, the concept is the sun is powered by external electricity, not a giant nuclear furnace. They have a YouTube channel with up to 3 full-length documentaries and many shorter videos. The theory actually goes all the way back to the turn of the century. There is even an ongoing science experiment where they try to replicate the electric sun model in a lab, with which they have had great success. Anyway, I hope you guys look into it, because this ties in very closely to ancient civilizations and catastrophes. Thanks.
Watcher wants to know if you've ever heard of Electric Universe.
Thanks, John. I've never heard of this theory. I don't know what you're talking about. I'll have to look it up. Thanks, buddy. No, yeah, we have, and we've talked about Electric Universe. If you're interested, you probably can go scroll through, the shows and look for titles that are called Electric Universe. They may be older ones, so you might have to look on the archives on the website. But we have talked about it quite extensively, and yes, we are aware of it. And I've watched most of the videos. Kyle's listened to Walt Thornhill talk about it, and I have too on many podcasts and interviews. So yes, we have heard of it. Thank you. Okay, this one's called Another Cave You Can't Get In. This says, Dear Snake Bros and Sister, thought you might enjoy checking out the history page for River Bluff Cave. It's located in Greene County, Missouri. It was discovered sometime back when road construction was being done. Besides boasting of having the largest congregation of peccary tracks in the world, there's also snake remains reportedly found along with short-faced bear and large cat claw marks. The site claims it has been sealed for some 50,000 years, so no evidence of humans, or so they say. Love your show, and the Snake Sister is a great addition. Best wishes from Den.
Thank you.
That's cool. Thank you.
I haven't heard of that. It's in Missouri. So if we got any snakes in Missouri, try to break into that cave.
That no human has ever
been into. Yeah.
That no man has ever entered.
Okay, this is from Brian again. This we read. He's from the guy from the Uinta Basin, I think. He says, Snakes! Greetings, Snake Bros. Wanted to share with you a great adventure author, John Turk. Aside from the amazing stories of his many expeditions and his meeting with a native shaman on Russo's East Coast, was the motive for the journey he set out upon in his book, In the Wake of the Jomon. In a nutshell, with minimal spoilers, he kayaks from Japan to Russia to Alaska to prove a theory that the Jomon, one of our prehistoric ancestors, could have taken small boats to reach North America. Spoiler, he makes it, and so did the Jomon. Beringia be damned. John had told me the inspiration for the expedition came from an Inuit friend whom chastised him during a discussion of man coming across the Bering Strait. Quote, "You silly white men, always thinking we walked the planet. We are boat people. We would have paddled," is what the guy said.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a great read and interesting take on prehistoric travel. I probably should reread it myself, as the opening page says this: Kennewick Man, unusual travel suggestions or dancing lessons from God. By the way, thanks for the shout out on the last podcast. I have now promoted myself to captain of the Uinta Snake Force. Scriptards beware. Uinta Snake Force. Brian from hillcreekwoodshop.com.
Awesome.
And he says, what is your preferred shipping address for the 1-ups? Brian, if you're in the Discord, you can just hit !1up and it will just pop up the address.
Wow.
Yeah. Otherwise, I can reply with it to the email. Okay, this is from Clint from Arizona. It says, hello, discovered your podcast and Cosmography a few weeks ago, and I am loving it. I hope that my meager monthly donation on Patreon helps to get you guys straight to pyramids.
Thank you.
My wife and I will be in Arizona next month, and we'll be hiking in Jerome, Sedona, Flagstaff, and that big effing canyon. Do you have any suggestions for locations we should slither to? Thanks. Oh, and P.S. Snacks! There's lots of places in Arizona, man, for sure. But if you're in Sedona, that whole place is weird. Let's see. Keith. The Seven Seals. He says, greetings from Virginia. Just writing to give y'all an alternative, more esoteric take on the Seven Seals and Revelation discussed in the last episode. It seems possible to me that the Seven Seals represent the 7 chakras. The whole thing is a veiled instruction manual on how to awaken the Kundalini, or Christ consciousness. Edgar Casey did a lot of really interesting work on this topic. There's no way I can do the full interpretation justice in this email, but here is an introductory link. And he gives a link. It's from neardeath.com. Hopefully you can include it in the show notes and description. He says, I appreciate all that you do in sifting through and making all this info accessible to the public. Keep fighting for the liberation of knowledge and the good side of the Brotherhood. Snacks!
Yes!
From Keith.
Love that.
Hey, that's a great connection, I think.
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah.
Yep, the chakras. Let's see. What is this one? Nope. Okay. Oh, okay. We got some comments from Mr. Fontini on the website.
Yeah.
Hey, Fontini.
He says, my girlfriend knows when I'm listening to the Brothers of the Serpent podcast because when the bumper music at 40 minutes in or at the end, I put on a stone face and dance horribly. Such groovy beats. Also, can't wait till y'all take those banners on the road to some conferences and do some live podcasts. Would be dope. Snake it easy, dudes.
Yeah, man. Thanks, buddy.
And he also says, here's a new chat acronym, fell to my knees and wept. FTMKAW. Doesn't really roll off the tongue. On another note, the stars are a perfect way to record history.
Fell to my knees and wept. I love it.
But there must always remain a key to interpret them, such as art, stories, and writing. Without that, one is unable to see the history in the stars, and all record of it would be lost. History effectively wiped clean. Pretty mind-blowing to me. FTMKAW.
FTM cow. Cow.
Fell to my knees and wept.
Yes.
Okay, this is from David, who we haven't heard from him in a while.
Hey, buddy.
Yeah.
Jet Drill Project.
Yeah, he says, we are building a pyramid in Iowa.
Oh.
Hey.
Hello, Snake Brothers. This email is proof that the COVID grip is in part loosening. From those who brought you the Jed Drill, I'm happy to say a prior client of ours recently made initial outreach, and today we have wrapped our first project meeting, stipulating a budget for us to build a pyramid on his land. Yes, you read that right.
Yes.
Exactly how great it will be remains to be seen, and input from the wider world will definitely impact the scale. This is to be built on land that is part of a spiritual awareness retreat center in eastern Iowa, where contemplation of the infinite is intended to clearly reveal the dimensions of each of our respective certificates of ignorance.
Wow.
Within the pyramid will be a meditation area situated near a green hill, limestone bluffs, and a babbling brook. Our client said the words ley lines today, though I remain happily agnostic on this point, fully willing to explore. People will visit. There might even be drum circles because this isn't heaven, it's Iowa, and if you build it, they will drum. We'll be posting a short video of our initial on-site visits soon. We want to keep you and the Snake Force up to date and may well do one of those names in bricks things with either the cladding or the masonry. It all depends on how our budget applies to the scope and materials choice, etc. Wow.
That's awesome.
That's freaking awesome, man.
So what do you think? Do we go with the angle of the Great Pyramid, get bent pyramids out there, or choose the steep angle in Cestius, the decadent pyramid from Rome? Trick question, of course. 51.4 degrees closely, 1/7 of a circle seems the way to go to me. Yep, me too. But the client and design team will review all reasonable options. If, like the Great Pyramid, the ratios will still be descriptive of geodesy, you can tell Randall thanks from a fellow traveling man for understanding of the scale and variance on that. So, more later, I have to run the budget and get this deal going. Would love to talk to you about this project as it moves along. When the budget is finalized, we break ground before July.
Yes.
Thanks so much. More soon, David.
Can't wait.
Dude,
crap, dude.
that's really awesome.
Yes.
That is really cool.
That's going to be fun.
Yeah.
He was like, the jet drill didn't really work out building a pyramid.
Yeah. I also wanted to mention we got new Patreon supporters. Brian, 2160.
Thank you, buddy.
Yeah. Dennis, 1618.
Thank you, buddy.
And Colton, 1440. Wow.
Thank you, buddy.
Yeah, thank you, buddy. All right. That's all the listener communications.
Wow, thanks. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Love it. All right, let's take a break and get into Gods of Eden.
Yeah.
Snakes.
Straight to the point for Grandma. Brothers of the Serpent podcast.
Well, kind of. Russ did have an extra email he forgot to read.
Yeah, we got to do one more, and I just want to say that for all of you new listeners that love Electric Universe, Russ gets really irritated when people send him emails about Electric Universe.
It's just because there's so many.
We get so much of it. You know, that was
nothing personal, John Doe.
Right. That was a well-written one, but we get tons of people and people asking the same question, like, have you ever heard of this? And like, yeah, dude, we have.
Yeah, it's nothing personal, though.
Right.
I just wanted to say that because I mean, you know, I could hear the irritation in your voice.
Yeah. It is irritating. I don't know why. Maybe I shouldn't be irritated by it.
Well, it's just because it happens so often and they're new and then they bring it up.
Yeah, and also I wanted to say last week I said, I was telling you guys, I was like, I'm editing the emails. I'm only reading the good ones. That's not true. I can't read all the good ones either. There's just too many. Yeah. So I just wanted to say, like, to all of you who heard that and thought, oh, crap, if you didn't read my email, it's not a good one. No, not true. I just can't read them all. Okay, so this one that I missed here is from Martin. It doesn't have a subject. He says, "Hi guys, found your YouTube channel as a result of the stuff you do with Randall Carlson, and now I can't put it down. I think having Randall on board, so to speak, could mean that at long last we start to make some progress on what our true origins are. Part of doing this is for the people putting the argument forward to be, like Caesar's wife, above suspicion. You have a lot of stuff on your shows. I am assuming that some of the stuff in the programs you think is correct. Some of it could be, and some of it is a bit iffy. I think what you should clearly say in your introduction is that you are communicating ideas, some of which you believe and some of which you don't. You are doing it for the general good and to get discussion, and if possible, research going so that the truth, if there is such a thing, can be arrived at." So I understand what you're saying. That like Randall has a reputation to maintain, sort of, and that so you've gone from listening to Randall, now you come over to our podcast and you're hearing us talk about giants and aliens and stuff, and you're like, maybe you guys should make it clear that you don't believe everything you say on the podcast. Well, I wouldn't say it that way. I'm saying that we don't know anything.
Yeah, we don't know what's going on.
Right.
There's some stuff we talk about, dark matter.
Yeah.
I mean, that's that's at the forefront of physics community or cosmology. I don't know if that's true. They don't know if it's true. We're still going to talk about it.
Right.
But we actually have talked to Randall about like, hey, we're not going to be, we respect his reputation and the way he delivers information.
Yeah.
And we've like made comments on the show sometimes, brought up subjects, and then afterwards said, hey, should we not do that? We're careful about that, but this is our show.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about
whatever we want.
Crazy.
Well, how are you going to get 30% brain expansion if you don't talk about stuff?
Yeah, I think the idea of being above suspicion is impossible. The kind of people who you need to be above suspicion of, they're not going to let that happen. They're going to find something to say like this guy has no credibility.
Yeah, but I generally agree with the idea that yeah, we talk about a lot of stuff that we actually, you go way back into the early shows and there was some stuff that I was like, this is probably what's going on.
Yeah.
And now I don't think that anymore.
Right. Yeah, because it's an evolution of conversation.
Right. So this we're, because that's happened so many times, to me and Russ talking about all these things throughout, even before the podcast, we're like coming to that realization, like, okay, we have no idea what's going on.
Right.
So it's like Bayesian reasoning a little bit. What's probable? What's the most probable? This seems to be the most probable. Like, I think Graham Hancock's work, like the idea that humans built all this stuff.
Yeah.
That there was an ancient lost civilization is the most probable.
That's right.
Rather than an advanced alien race from another star system that came down here and made the Adamu and all this kind of, I think that's less probable.
Right.
But it is interesting that it's written about in these ancient texts.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So what was really going on? We don't know.
Yeah.
It's all interesting and it's all cool to talk about.
Yeah. And it's fun to, do the thought experiment. Like, what if that really was the case? And then you start looking at all the other evidence on the ground and say, what lines up, what doesn't? I don't know.
And that's what makes this beautiful podcast that everyone loves.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely wouldn't put it in terms of like what we believe, what we think is possible and what we think is iffy. That's not how I look at it. I mean, some stuff I'm like, this is a little out there, but it's just we have to discuss these things. So
I agree.
Like some stuff when we're reading when we were going through the Giants book, I'm like, Zoot Suit Giants. Like I found that story to be kind of improbable, but it was a great story.
Yeah.
And I mean, who knows? Stranger things have happened.
True.
So, all right. I think that's it.
But thank you for writing the emails.
Yeah.
Whether we love them, hate them, whatever.
Don't hate any of them.
Yeah.
Don't hate any of them.
That's true. We don't hate any of them.
And we appreciate the tough love in the reviews.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
tough love.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's what makes us stronger.
Yep. But it's our podcast. We're going to do what we want with it. Makes me want to wait to the last segment to even start doing this book. Let's talk about something else, guys. I'm rebellious like that. You got to be careful, Grandma. Okay, so the last,
love ya.
Yeah, we do.
Always have.
We love you.
Yeah.
So the last in the book, the last thing we were going through here was Marco Polo and the assassins, right? So I think the last thing I read was, how did the assassin sect get young men to commit the murders? It is not easy to make people kill others, especially when the murderer is likely to be caught and slain himself. The assassin organization had an effective method for overcoming this natural resistance and programming young men to kill. One of the earliest people to describe the assassin programming technique was Marco Polo, the famous European traveler of the 13th century, who wrote a best-selling book about his journeys. Although Marco Polo was accused by a few people in his own time of fabricating stories, subsequent investigation has verified nearly everything he described in his famous book. So that was the last thing we read, I think. So according to Mr. Polo, a portion of the assassin fortress in Alamut, I think that's how you say it, had been converted to a beautiful secret garden fashioned after the paradise described in Muhammad's visions of heaven. The garden grew almost every imaginable type of fruit and was watered with streams of wine, milk, and honey. The palaces were beautifully ornamented and had a company of singers, dancers, and musicians. If certain young men in the region showed promise as potential murderers, they were drugged, usually with opium or hashish, and taken into the secret garden. There they were pampered for a few days, and nothing was denied them, including women. They were then drugged again and returned to their homes. The young men believed that the assassin leaders had transported them to heaven and back. Eager to return, the young men would gladly follow the instructions of their assassin leaders. The heaven-struck underlings were often told that a return to paradise lay in boldly assassinating a targeted enemy leader. The young assassin was instructed to wait in a public place and strike down the victim with a dagger as the victim passed by. Because the young assassins would often be killed on the spot or later be executed, they were made to believe that their death at the scene of the crime or by later execution would result in a return to the paradise that they remembered.
Wow, that's an elaborate scheme.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The notoriety of the assassins spread. It was rumored that some European kings were paying tribute to the assassins to avoid becoming targets. Although the extent of the assassin activity in Europe is still debated today, some historians assert that the assassins focused most of their deadly practices on the conflicts going on in the Middle East. The assassins became famous far and wide. As a result, all people who attempt the murder of a political leader have come to be known as assassins or users of hashish. Although most modern assassins have not been hashish users, many have shown evidence of considerable mental tampering, which will be discussed near the end of this book. That's interesting. You know, and I think this happens, people suspect this with mass shootings too. Like there's something weird with drugs and, you know, they're on some kind of pharmaceutical or something.
Yes, I've heard
they're on
that.
SSRIs and they've been tampered with and they're a little bit strange. And I'm thinking of the Aurora one in particular. That was a very strange case. Mm-hmm. By the end of the 13th century, the Mongols had overrun the Middle East and had destroyed major assassin strongholds. Interestingly, the Mongols were also inspired by mystical beliefs. The assassins managed to survive the onslaught, and they still exist today. Modern assassin sects are reported to be peaceably settled in India, Iran, and Syria. Their titular head is the Aga Khan, who is the spiritual leader of all Ismailians worldwide. The Ismailians are estimated to number about 20 million people today. As of 1840, the Aga Khans have been operating out of India because of an unsuccessful rebellion in 1838 of Aga Khan I against the Persian Shah. When this rebellion failed, Britain offered sanctuary to the Aga Khan in India, which was even then under British rule. Since then, the Aga Khans have been traveling in elite circles of Western society. Recent Aga Khans have received educations at Oxford, Harvard, and in Switzerland. They have also gained a place in the international banking community through their establishment of a central bank in Damascus in Lebanon. What?
Is there a long head at the top?
I know, right? It may be a coincidence that lone assassins arose as an important phenomenon in the United States at just about the time that Aga Khan I was establishing a relationship with the British in the early 19th century. The first known lone assassin to strike a U.S. president did so in 1835. The intended victim was Andrew Jackson, who was, interestingly, a member of the Knights Templar organization in America. Since then, U.S. presidents have been targets of lone assassins every 10 to 20 years. Many other Western leaders and public figures have also been victims. Although I have seen no evidence that the assassin sect itself is behind modern lone assassin episodes, it is clear that their technique has been picked up and used by influential political sources with Brotherhood connections in the Western world, as I shall discuss more in a later chapter. As we have seen, the Crusade era witnessed the birth of institutions which still affect us today. To the list, we can add two famous Christian orders, the Franciscans and the Dominicans. The Franciscans adopted the cord at the loins outfit and bald spot used by ancient Egyptian Brotherhood priests at El Amarna. The Franciscans appear to be quite humane. The Dominicans, on the other hand, were placed in charge of the most widely hated byproduct of the Crusades, the Catholic Inquisition. The Medieval Inquisition has been universally condemned as one of the most oppressive human institutions ever developed. It was known for its tortures and zealous excesses. It arose out of an effort by Pope Innocent II to stamp out a large heretical sect in the south of France known as the Albigensians. Innocent II had called for a special crusade in 1208 to enter France and wipe out this sect. A crusade to enter France. Think about that. They send the crusade into France, not the Middle East, to wipe out the sect of Albigensians, a heretical sect. The 5-year war which ensued devastated the region, and 10 years later, a new pope, Gregory IX, continued this action. He placed the Dominicans in charge of investigating the Albigensians. Gregory gave the Dominican order full legal power to name and condemn all surviving heretics. Out of this campaign grew the full inhuman machinery of the Catholic Inquisition, which sought to stamp out heresy of every type. The Inquisition generated a fearful climate of intellectual and spiritual oppression in Europe for the next 600 years. Hearsay, innuendo, and honest intellectual disagreement led many decent people to the torture rack and auto da fe, or death by burning. The social scars are still visible today in the instinctive fear so many people have of expressing non-conforming ideas. The Inquisition helped breed a social reaction of violence to non-conforming ideas that the world has not yet fully escaped, or at least the Western world. It is clear that the Christian church had undergone many changes by the time the Crusades ended. The church was no longer the humanitarian, decentralized religion envisioned by Jesus. The new Catholic, which means undivided, church, headquartered in Rome, had succumbed to the reforms of the East Roman emperors. It was a religion Jesus would have deplored. Fortunately, after the demise of the Inquisition, the Catholic Church began to improve, and it has many good qualities today. Perhaps the most significant event of the Crusades does not involve the waging of war, the programming of assassins, or the creation of an Inquisition. It entails the making of a peace. In the year 1228, German Emperor Frederick II led a crusade to Jerusalem. Frederick was not in good graces with the Pope at the time. Frederick had been described as a strange, secular-minded, a highly educated prince, a sworn enemy of the papacy on political grounds, who had acquired by marriage the title to what was left of the Kingdom of Jerusalem. Frederick's fight with Pope Gregory IX had begun only 1 year before his trip to Jerusalem. The conflict between Frederick and Pope Gregory centered around the issue of centralized papal power. Frederick opposed it, and Gregory was striving to hasten it. This dispute caused Frederick to be put under sentence of excommunication, a sentence finally carried out in 1245. While under the sentence, but not yet excommunicated, the unrepentant Frederick journeyed to his kingdom in Jerusalem at the head of his own crusade. Despite a deep involvement with the Teutonic Knights, Frederick II proved on that trip that he could be a man of peace. Instead of prolonging the war with the Muslims, Frederick negotiated a peace treaty. He apparently felt that it was in everyone's best interest to end this religious strife, and that is precisely what he did. He accomplished this feat by negotiating with the reigning Muslim leader, the Sultan Kamil. Within a year of starting his talks with the Sultan, and without the approval of the Pope, Frederick concluded a treaty signed in 1229 that gave Jerusalem back to the Christians for 10 years, provided that the Christians did not arm themselves, and this arrangement worked. So he goes for a crusade, and he's like, let's have peace, guys. And it worked for 10 years. Using negotiation and appeals to reason, Frederick had accomplished in one short trip what the popes had claimed they were trying to do for almost 130 years with warfare and blood. Under Frederick's treaty, Christians were free to inhabit Jerusalem and make pilgrimages there, and the Muslims were freed from the threat posed by Christian armies. Many Christian and Muslim leaders were not at all happy with this arrangement, however, for Frederick had set it up, quote, leaving both parties indignant at so peaceful a settlement. When the truce finally ran out in 1239, the Holy War was resumed, unquote. So we might legitimately he has a footnote here. There is an amusing sideline to the story. After Frederick completed the treaty, he wanted to be crowned monarch of Jerusalem per his inheritance. Because he was under sentence of excommunication, no Catholic authority would perform the ceremony for him. Frederick, however, was not one to be thwarted by technicalities. He simply crowned himself and sailed back home to Germany. Fine. Puts the hat on. I am king.
Bye-bye now.
So we might legitimately ask, why was Frederick's treaty not extended or a similar one negotiated? What purpose was served by diving into 70 additional years of bloody warfare? And the Christians wound up losing the Holy Land altogether. Right? So it is an interesting question. 130 years of fighting, this dude shows up, negotiates a truce. It lasts for 10 years. Everything's great. The Christians have the Holy Land. It's got a German king. You know, they can go there and there's no fighting anymore. And then after the treaty runs out, they start fighting again, and the Christians completely lose the Holy Land after 70 more years of war.
That's
You'd
insane.
think when they were coming to the end of the treaty, somebody would like kind of do an amendment, like let's extend this.
Right.
You know, can we?
But what he's saying is that the leaders on both sides didn't like it. But
right.
It seems like the implication there is that the people
did like it. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So there you go, custodial.
Yep. Mm-hmm. One answer to this question may be found in what the Muslims and Christians thought they were ultimately fighting for, their spiritual salvation and freedom. They believed that by fighting, and perhaps even dying gloriously for their faith, they were guaranteed eternal salvation. History has clearly demonstrated that the drive for spiritual freedom is so strong that it can override any human drive, including the urge for physical self-preservation. And I wonder about that. I mean, I guess if you're thinking about eternity versus what happens in this short life, and you believe that to make your eternity awesome, you have to do something horrible here. I don't know. But that's kind of an intellectual exercise, isn't it? Is it really a drive like he's talking about? It sounds to me like an intellectual exercise, like something you think, but it isn't like a drive like the reproductive drive or the drive to stay alive.
I see what you're saying.
You know? Is there really a spiritual enlightenment or salvation drive like we have these other ones? Or is it just a different thing?
That I don't know.
Instant gratification or not? What are you going to go with?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I see what you're...
He's claiming...
Because if you're not educated at all, you still have a drive to survive, and you still have a drive to procreate.
Yeah.
But you have to be educated on these ideas to have this drive to, like, exist in another world later.
Yeah. Is that true, though? Like, that's what I'm wondering.
I guess, I mean, it seems plausible.
It seems like that's what it is. It's an intellectual exercise, right?
Yeah.
But maybe it's not.
Maybe there is an actual base drive for this. I don't know.
Yeah.
Any studies ever been done on that? Do we have a basic
Probably
spiritual
not.
drive? Probably not.
Well, all the people that are capable of doing the studies are atheists.
Right. Okay, so at
Not
some...
all.
Yeah, not all of them.
Just a joke.
Right. At some point, people will sacrifice their own physical existences and even the physical survival of loved ones if they believe that the sacrifice will ensure their spiritual integrity or that it will bring about their spiritual salvation. When genuine spiritual knowledge is distorted, yet the desire for spiritual salvation continues to be stimulated, a great many people can be led into doing a great many stupid things. One important step to solving the problem of war, then, is to achieve a true understanding of the spirit and an actual way to its rehabilitation. That last part's probably true. Whether or not there's an actual drive, I'd say that if people really understand what was actually going on in terms of like this life, afterlife, spirit stuff or whatever, it would probably change a lot of things and people's willingness to wage war. And, you know, I mean, not every war is a holy war. So I don't think you can say that that would end wars.
Yeah, and I mean, you have to think about what constitutes a war or constitutes a war. Like this is not war is not just a situation between governments. You can be at war with one person.
Yep. Or with ants.
That's damn right.
Leaf cutter ants. Dun, dun, dun.
Their grace is dried up. But yeah, I mean, so we're always going to be fighting our...
Right, but this human conflict, I think, you know, this mass conflict is what he's talking about.
Yes, the mass conflict for sure. Yeah, I think...
especially modern warfare, you know, in modern times, there's plenty of war that isn't wholly based. There is still lots of wholly based wars, but there's plenty that's just not about any kind of god. It's just about conquest. You know, there's lots of wars that happen in Africa that are just completely about land conquest and stuff. And there's then there's the like the expansion of the Soviet Union there was no god in that. They were just taking places over because conquest, right?
Right.
I mean, the Soviet Union was specifically atheist.
Yeah.
And they didn't use like any kind of holy roller crap to get their people to go fight either. You know?
Right.
Yeah.
It was all about the state or the expansion of the kingdom or something. It's not a holy war. But maybe I guess you can look at it in a way if the institutions take over the place of the religion or the god or whatever, then it's kind of using the same drives, maybe. I don't know, but it isn't. You're not talking about God, so it's a different thing.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Game of Dukes.
The game of Dukes. When we look at the spiritual practices of the Christian knights and the Muslim Ismailians, we discover that participation in warfare was often exalted as a spiritual quest. Warriors on both sides were inspired by corrupted Brotherhood mysticisms, which taught that spiritual rewards would be earned by engaging in military endeavors against fellow human beings. This was the mythology of the spiritually noble war, in which gallant soldiers were promised eternal salvation and a place in heaven for fighting a noble cause. Wow. This mythology still remains vital today for recruiting people to participate in continued warfare. It twists the urge for spiritual freedom into an honoring of war. What is war, then, if not a noble quest? Analyzed down to its most basic components, warfare is nothing more than the act of causing solid objects to destructively collide with other solid objects. That's right.
Well, Watcher's pointing out that you can convince people of an ideal or, an idea, like the state can convince you of an idea and it's something greater than yourself.
Yeah.
And that it's similar.
Similar. Yeah.
But it's not, quote unquote, holy. Right.
Yeah.
Fighting for the cause.
Well, and I don't know. To me, I'm looking at it in one term. You're fighting for your own eternal salvation, right? Infinite life in the afterlife, awesomeness. Or let's make our state more wealthy, and your kids will have better stuff. I don't know. There's a kind of a big difference to me there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yes, you're right. You can implant ideals into people, and they're fighting for something greater than themselves.
Yeah, I would say that the holy war idea is a much more powerful tool because war requires all of this physical stuff, like the guy's saying, just smashing stuff together, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
If the idea is infinite life in paradise, then that just basically just like none of this matters. Like my body,
nothing that happens to you matters. Yeah.
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 Nothing matters about that,
a good
about
point.
any of this.
Whereas if you're going to fight for an ideal of a state or freedom or something like that, it doesn't tell you that if you die in that war, you're going to have an eternity of happiness.
Yeah. Good points.
Okay. So analyzed down to its most basic components, warfare is nothing more than the act of causing solid objects to destructively collide with other solid objects. That might sometimes be fun, but there is not much spiritual benefit to be derived from constantly engaging in it. Although it is true that war has many elements of a game, the destructive nature of war causes it to be little more than a series of criminal acts, primarily arson, battery, and murder. This reveals something of great significance. And then he has this in italics. War is the institutionalization of criminality. War can never bring about spiritual improvement because criminality is one of the main causes of mental and spiritual deterioration. So that's in italics there, so he thinks that's really important. The institutionalization of criminality. And I mean, there's always the whole who are the aggressors and who are the defenders, right? I mean, and that always blurs. But is fighting to keep somebody from raiding your little village and fighting and killing the people that are trying to do that? Is that evil war? You just let them roll over you? I don't know. That's what I'm saying. I go out and slaughter a whole bunch of people that are trying to come in and set my town on fire and steal everything and rape everybody. Am I doing evil stuff?
Yeah.
Probably damaging things to me. If I went out and murdered a whole bunch of people to stop that, I'm doing the right thing, but it's going to have a cost.
Right.
Yeah. Your psyche's going to be affected.
Yeah,
by that.
exactly. And we see that with returning veterans and whatever.
Yeah.
They're always affected.
Yep.
But I'm just saying, it's the institutionalization of criminality is the question. That's what I'm saying. It's not that black and white, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
I think it's a natural state, honestly. I disagree with that. I mean, I don't, it's just one way of analyzing it is that it's almost the natural state of being to be at war.
Yeah.
He's talking about the institution, and that's one thing.
Yeah.
But in general, there is always going to be, you put yourself in a survival situation, and you have a family to take care of, and then there's another person who's starving to death, and you have food.
Yeah.
Right. And they see that you have food, and they come to steal it in the middle of the night. That's an act of war.
Yeah.
They're trying to preserve their life, and in so doing, they are
putting yours at risk.
They're putting your life and the life of the people that you love at risk.
Yeah.
So we make tools. You make a spear. You build a wall, a cage, or a house, and you put locks on things because you're at war.
Yeah.
Always.
All the time.
There is no not being at war.
You're always trying to survive.
Right.
You're at war with the elements. You're at war with nature. You're at war with mankind.
Yeah.
all
In
the time.
conflict. Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
So you can come up with the institution of like a set of laws. And those laws are there so that everybody can agree on them, and then there's enforcement.
Yeah.
But that's so that we all have an understanding and we're not at war all the time. You just, you never know if the guy next to me may just be broke and he's just going to come over and take everything that I have.
Yeah.
But no, there's a institution in place to keep that from happening. And then you've got enforcers of that institution.
Right. And so what you're saying is those institutions are explicit expressions of our understanding that we're constantly at conflict.
Exactly.
Right. So we have all
There
these
would be
rules and laws, and we have walls and locks and everything because we know that
We're always at war.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so for the
these
most
things
part,
are all deterrents.
That's
Yeah.
right. That's right.
Yeah.
And then this is what the police force does is like they're going to come and make sure that the people that are going to cross the boundaries, they basically have to go to war with those people.
Yeah.
Those people are already creating an act of war by breaking the compact. John Locke.
Yeah.
This is basically the way Locke wrote about natural law. So
Yeah.
I think he was brilliant. So I don't necessarily agree with his premise, but he's more or less talking about entire governments taking their people and doing this sort of thing.
Right. And it's always, you can trace it like he's doing here. You can trace these things back and back and back and back and find the beginnings of these conflicts so far back, and they're still happening.
It's just nuts.
Yeah.
Some people hold grudges.
And there's little, like the thing he just did with Frederick, making the peace treaty. There's little indications that it doesn't have to be like that, but there are some people that just
hold that grudge,
want it to keep going.
Yeah,
I think that's the idea that he's trying to point out, right?
Yeah, these are the custodians moving around in the background.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which definitely seems to be the case.
Yeah,
Like
whatever they might be.
Exactly. That's the thing, whether they're the descendants of the Anunnaki or something, I don't know.
Yeah, right.
Whether they came from Nibiru.
Yeah.
But it definitely, there's a pattern going on there.
Yeah, Watcher's asking a lot of questions up here. Why is it that when a person is at a state-endorsed war, egregious crimes are okay? Well, that's that's an ethical question. Like read the book A Time to Kill. Was it the right thing to do? The guy's daughter gets murdered, so he kills that guy. Did he do something wrong?
Took the law into his own hands.
Right, because he knew that he was getting away with it.
Yeah. I don't remember the movie or the book.
So I'm saying those are complicated ethical questions. But it's an egregious crime if you're the aggressor. But sometimes that's the other one. You go back to this whole they're coming to raid the village thing, right? So you go out and you kill everybody trying to raid your village.
You're the aggressor.
Well, they're the aggressor, but then if you they're going to do it, so I'm going to go kill them before they even get here.
Yeah.
Then you're the aggressor, but are you doing the right thing? That's what I'm saying. It's ethics, right? This is complicated ethics. You're preemptively, a preemptive attack.
Yeah.
They're planning to come and raid your village and set everything on fire. So you go raid theirs and set everything on fire.
Yeah, you round up your buddies, make a plan.
Yeah.
We're going to go in the middle of the night.
So did you do something wrong?
Yeah, it's a tough one. self-defense. They're all thinking,
Hey,
we got to do this. It's
Yeah.
the right thing, but
Right.
it's
Can you
tricky.
call it self-defense?
If you wait until they come, you'll lose.
Yeah.
It's tricky.
So like in that scenario,
Right.
You know, like
Yeah.
if we wait until they come, we'll lose.
They're gonna win, yeah.
They're building stuff. They're
Yeah.
getting ready. We have to go now,
Right.
or we'll die. This is what I'm saying. Like this is read John Locke.
Right.
God, the guy is genius. I love it.
Okay. So is not warfare in pursuit of a just cause a good thing? The biggest problem with using violent force to fight for a cause is that the rules of force operate on completely different principles than do the principles of right and wrong. The victorious use of violent force depends upon skills that have nothing to do with whether or not one's cause is a just one. The man who can draw his 6-shooter the fastest is not necessarily the man with the best ideals. We like our heroes when they can outshoot or physically overpower the bad guys, and there is nothing wrong with their being able to do so, but not all of our heroes can. Those who have a legitimate cause should therefore be wary of the temptation to assert the rightness of their beliefs in the arena of violent force, since their cause may undeservedly lose. There are many effective methods to promote good causes and make them win, but those methods are seldom used in a world educated to use violence as the ultimate court of appeal. I agree with that. Like, what is like trial by combat? That's what I want. You gonna take me to court? No. I challenge you to trial by combat.
Yes.
If you win, you were right.
I demand a trial by combat. Game of Deuces.
Game of deuce.
That one's gonna need an explanation. All right, we're gonna take another break.
Yeah. Fully aware of the electric universe here at the Brothers of the Serpent podcast. Totally aware of it. Know a lot about it. Thanks for asking.
And I want to say to Anne, I can hear those pages turning too, and I love it.
You like it?
I like it.
I mean,
Look, for future books, you know, when you're doing it on your phone, I'll just sit here and occasionally just.
there you go. Sound effects. Also, I wanted to give, before we get back into the book, I want to give a quick shout out to 2 people in the Discord. Tony, dude, conversations with you are great. Just wanted to say what's up. And also Pyramid Man. That guy is awesome. He said he's applying for the position of everyone's dad, which is great. So you can ask him for advice and he'll give you shit until he'll tell you you're worthless. He's like, everyone's dad.
I need to get back in there. I haven't been in there in a while.
Yeah.
I should probably pop
Sorry,
in.
guys.
Poke
Yeah. People have been asking. I'm like, I need to get Laura in here, obviously, because now they're like, hey, what did Laura think? And I'm like, okay, I know. The Fat Buddha thing was her deal. I mean, we've gotten so many comments on Fat Buddha. I'm like, that was all Laura, guys.
It was all me, and I would just like to say that when we closed it out that time, I went to bed that night thinking, okay,
Yeah.
it's all cool.
But so a couple of really cool things about that. A couple people pointed out that if you start in Thailand or something, he's thin. All the depictions of him are very thin. And then as you move farther and farther east, he gets fatter and fatter and fatter in the depiction. So that may be a
Astronomical.
or a reference to his life and his travel. As he got older and he moved farther, he got older and fatter.
Okay.
Oh, because I would think that if he went further east, he'd get thinner because they just eat healthier over there.
He just got older and fatter.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
I don't know.
I would think if he was
propaganda.
moving, I would think if he was moving
Come
west,
on.
he'd get fatter. But
Big Mac and fries, baby.
ooh, McDonald's tastes so good after quarantine.
But yeah, they were showing pictures of the statues of depictions of him further west, and he's very young and thin, right? And then they're showing other pictures of him sitting there, and he's kind of buff looking.
Yeah.
But then as you go farther and farther, he gets older and more chunky.
Okay. Well, the main thing is now I know.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
Yeah. That is the main thing.
That's the main thing. Now I know.
All right. Let's do it.
Yeah. So we're on chapter 16 now, Messiahs and Means. Throughout history, there have been thousands of people claiming to be a Messiah, or they have been given the label by others even if they did not claim it themselves. Such messianic claims are usually based upon prophecies recorded earlier in history, such as the Buddhist Messiah legend, the Second Coming prophecy of the Book of Revelation, the apocalyptic teachings of Zoroaster, or the Hebrew prophecies. Many people look at all messianic claims with outright skepticism. Others become avid followers of a leader whom they believe to be a fulfillment of a religious prophecy. This raises the question, has there ever been, or will there ever be, a genuine Messiah? How would one identify such a person? Anyone who successfully develops a functional science of the spirit would obviously have a legitimate claim to the title of Messiah in the teacher's sense. There is nothing mystical or apocalyptic about this. A person makes some discoveries and shares them. If this knowledge becomes widely known and results in widespread spiritual salvation, then we enter the realm of the liberator or prophesized Messiah. How do we identify such a liberator when there exist so many different prophecies with so many ways to interpret them? The answer is simple. The would-be liberator must succeed. That person must earn the title. It is not God-given.
I think that most of these Messiah things are done posthumously.
Yeah.
So we don't actually know because we weren't there. Were people calling
Then the living
whatever
Messiah
person
or whatever.
while they were alive? Oh, it's the Messiah.
Yeah. I think
You
he
know-
was saying that that's what happened to Jesus. That's why he eventually gets
Yeah.
arrested and stuff. But it
Well,
was
in a
other
lot-
people claiming it. Yeah.
Right. In a lot of cases, it's the story is it's changed
Written.
after the fact.
Yeah.
Right. It's revisionist history in a way.
Yeah. And sometimes written long after the fact.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When most people envision a Messiah, they see a person dressed in spotless white who thinks and speaks and behaves in the saintliest of manner. This may be the wrong image to look for in determining whether or not someone has made the discoveries necessary to achieve spiritual salvation. Developing a successful spiritual science would be no different than developing a successful science of aeronautics. The key scientists may not all be saints. Some of them may even be people you would not invite into your home. But their airplanes do fly. It is an irony that more important discoveries are often made by unsavory personalities. Witness, for example, the Scandinavian Vikings, who charted vast unknown regions, but plundered as they went. Religion ultimately addresses the survival of the individual spiritual being and, as we shall discuss near the end of this book, the possible survival of a supreme being of some sort. It is therefore easy for people to become quite zealous about religion. There is nothing wrong with that zealousness as long as it is guided by compassion and good sense. We have already seen how several religions initially rooted in very humanitarian ideals have betrayed those ideals and became tyrannies far worse than any tyrannies the religions had opposed. This usually happens when religious adherents believe that the means used to achieve an altruistic goal will always be justified as long as the goal is attained. Their logic seems sensible enough, but is it? I think this is I don't know. This to me is another. Did Locke talk about this? The idea that I was just thinking when I was
ends
reading.
justify the means, basically.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking when I was reading this that the most dangerous kind of person is the person who thinks that that they're doing something really, really good, like saving the world, right?
Yeah.
If you're saving the world, then what won't you do to achieve that goal?
Right.
Exactly.
Not that I can recall. No.
Okay. Because I mean, if you're thinking to yourself, okay, there's 8 billion people on the planet, and I'm trying to save all of them. They're all going to die if I don't do this. Well, if I have to kill 4 billion of them to do it,
Yeah.
that's fine. That's what I'm saying. The people who actually like, if you look at a lot of old hero tales, they don't ever think they're saving the world. You know, a lot of the hero stories, the hero is trying to save something small and specific, and ends up saving the world.
Yeah.
And it's because of that. Like, in other words, he's not setting out to save the whole planet because then he would be ruthless in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah.
But a true good hero in a lot of the stories holds on to ethics and morals and everything because he doesn't think that he's trying to save billions and billions of people or the whole planet or whatever. He thinks he's trying to save something small.
Yeah.
So I think that's what he's kind of saying here. Like, religious adherents or, anybody who has this idea, they believe that the means used to achieve an altruistic goal will always be justified as long as the goal is attained.
Right.
It just makes you very dangerous.
Yep. Yep. I agree with that. That would be good to tack on to Locke's
Yeah.
breakdown, because he would break things down to the simplest of situations.
Okay, yeah.
Right. Which is why I gave an example.
Right.
Already. And that's how he would kind of then he would go back out and say, like, look, this is natural. This is the world we live in.
Yeah.
So it was really
Now you're making me. I'm gonna go read that now.
Yeah.
That sounds really
I
interesting.
did read it,
Natural
but I
law.
can't remember. I can almost remember none of it. It was a long time ago. But yeah, I mean, if you think about it, in any decision making you make, there are choices you make, and almost everyone involves, like, you can even think of the smallest example. Like, let's say that you're rock climbing, right? You're just climbing a cliff. Okay. And you get to a point where you're like, I'm either going to fall or I got to jam my wrist into this crack. Right. And the risk, so there's a risk assessment there, right?
Wrist is expendable.
Right. In order to save my life.
Right.
Right. So you make this sacrifice. You jam your wrist into the crack. Maybe it doesn't break it. Maybe it does, but you don't die.
Yeah.
Immediately.
Right.
Right.
So we do this all the time. We're constantly making decisions like that. There's little things you do that kind of hurt when you do it, but you do it because whatever you're trying to do is more important than that little bit of pain, even if it's something tiny, like if something hurt, like, I don't know, people take mushrooms and they know it might make them throw up, but they take it anyway.
Yeah.
Right. So there's all kinds of, we're constantly making risk assessment choices. So when you think that the world hangs in the balance, the kinds of sacrifices you're willing to make, if you really believe that, make you incredibly dangerous.
Yes.
Right.
Like
and
I was saying.
And if it's up to you, then you will also go to any lengths to preserve your own life.
That's right.
Yeah, like I was saying, one of the other times we didn't hear those true believers.
Yeah.
Are the really powerful, scary ones.
Right. If you really believe it. Yeah. Yeah.
Every day you tell that self-talk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Where was I at here? Yeah, okay. So it is an unfortunate fact of life that the means will always shape the ends. No matter how noble an end may be, the final result will always resemble the means used to attain it. I think this is interesting philosophically. The means shape the ends. So if your goal is like incredibly noble, but you just use all these horrible methods to get there, you're not going to achieve this noble thing. It's going to be shaped by the means you use to achieve it.
Yeah.
Yes, I can see that.
Yeah.
Don't use Horcruxes for everlasting life.
There you go. You end up looking like Brad. Poor guy. Sorry, Brad.
Thanks to a YouTube comment.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
It is in this way that some of the most stellar goals can create some of the most oppressive and deadly institutions. A frequent character in literature is the altruistic individual who gradually becomes just like the evils he is fighting because he uses the same means that the enemy is using. This results in our finally not being able to tell the difference between the altruist and the opponent. We frequently see this phenomenon occur on a larger scale involving organizations and governments. To judge an individual organization, therefore, one must do more than merely consider its professed goal or aim. One must also scrutinize the actual day-to-day means being used to reach this goal. No matter how sincere the individuals are, what they eventually create will be determined greatly by the means they are using. Interestingly, a group with less lofty aims can sometimes achieve far more good, even more than its own members may have intended, if it is employing honest and constructive means to attain its purpose.
Yep.
See?
I think that's a
That's
great.
what yeah. It's don't try to save the world is basically what I'm saying. Don't do it. Makes you dangerous. As we can see, an organization which justifies killing, defamation, and Machiavellian manipulations to gain influence and defeat opponents in the name of a higher goal is creating a world in which killing and defamation and turmoil are taking place. On the other hand, a person who believes in always telling the truth so that her knitting club will be respected is creating a world in which truth is being told. Ultimately, the best of all possible worlds combines a lofty goal with lofty means to attain it, since the accomplishment of a goal usually requires a conscious effort to achieve it. Second to that, noble means to a lesser goal will benefit the world far more than disreputable means to a higher goal.
Yes, that's a great quote right there.
Yeah, should have put that in italics.
You can't save the world anyway because we're all going to die.
Yeah.
The planet's doomed.
Yeah.
I mean,
So,
come on.
don't try anyway. It's not going to work.
I mean, it is the material universe. It's all doomed,
Yeah.
right? In the long run. You're totally right.
Yeah.
All right. Chapter 17, Flying Gods over America. By the time of the Crusades, major dramas had unfolded on the opposite side of the globe. Great civilizations had come and gone on the American continents. It is difficult to study the history of the ancient American civilizations because nearly all original records from those civilizations were destroyed centuries ago. As a result, historians are often confronted with disputes over the most basic facts, such as dates. For example, time estimates regarding the great Mayan civilization have placed it anywhere from 30,000 years ago to 12,000 years ago to only 700 years ago. For the purposes of this book, I will use the dates most commonly accepted by modern historians and archaeologists, which means the youngest one. Many archaeologists believe that the first important North American civilization was the Olmec Society of Mexico. It is estimated to have flourished from around 800 BC till 400 BC. Now, this has changed a lot since he wrote this. They've got stuff, Olmec stuff, that's like 4000 BC.
Yeah.
Very little is known about the Olmecs except that they left behind impressive ruins which included a large pyramid. The existence of the pyramid is strong evidence that there was interaction between the Old and New Worlds in the BC years. The Olmecs are believed to have given birth to the famous Mayan civilization which followed. The Mayan culture extended from Mexico to Central America and lasted from about 300 BC until 900 AD. Like the Olmecs, the Mayans were fond of building pyramids. Surprisingly, some Mayan pyramids were given a limestone facing like the earlier pyramids in Egypt. The Mayans also copied the Egyptians by mummifying bodies and by holding similar beliefs about a physical afterlife. According to historian Raymond Cartier, quote, other analogies with Egypt are discernible in the admirable art of the Maya. Their mural paintings and frescoes and decorated vases show a race of men with strongly marked Mesopotamian features, engaged in all sorts of activities, agriculture, fishing, building, politics, and religion. Egypt alone is depicted in these activities with the same cruel verisimilitude or appearance of truth, but the pottery of the Mayas recalls that of the Etruscans, which is an ancient civilization of Italy. Their reliefs remind one of India, and the huge, steep stairways of their pyramidal temples are like those at Angkor Wat in Cambodia, dedicated to Hindu worship. Unless they obtained their models from the outside, their brains must have been so constructed that they adopted the same forms of artistic expression as all the other great civilizations, ancient civilizations of Europe and Asia. Did civilization then spring from one particular geographical region and then spread gradually in every direction like a forest fire? Or did it appear spontaneously and separately in various parts of the world? Were some races the teachers and others the pupils? Or were they all self-taught? Isolated seeds? Or one parent stem giving off shoots in every direction? Unquote.
Mm-hmm. Enter Graham Hancock. I think the Olmecs died out. They lost their civilization due to a coin toss.
What?
It was tails.
What? It wasn't heads.
It was not heads. So, yeah. Lame joke.
No, that was good. I just had to think about it. I was like, wait a minute. Oh, Olmec heads. They clearly lost.
Yeah. It was over.
They were so confident that their toss was going to win that they built all these giant stone heads. And they were like, guys, we got this. Bling. Nope. The coincidences are far too strong for the American civilizations to have arisen independently of the old world societies. Jungian theories of a collective unconscious are hardly satisfactory. The striking similarities indicate that the American civilizations were part of a global society, even if some ancient American inhabitants were not aware of it. A similar situation exists today. In different cities around the world, we find modern skyscrapers that look remarkably alike no matter where on the globe they stand, from Singapore to Africa to the United States. It can be a surprise to see in a remote African nation a tall, glassy skyscraper that is virtually identical to a skyscraper in Chicago or London. The surrounding culture, however, may be radically different in each country, indicating that the skyscraper in Africa is not a product of the native African culture there, but the product of an independent global influence. A similar global influence clearly existed more than a millennium ago, as evidenced by the remarkable similarities between ancient Maya and Egyptian cultures. That global influence appears to have been the custodial society, because as soon as we review ancient American writings, we encounter once again our custodial friends. So that's interesting. He's saying that
that's a great point, though.
Yeah.
The skyscraper.
Yeah. That the pyramids we see all over the place
Right.
are actually just the remnants of the skyscrapers that they were making. And,
Right.
and that's true. Like they did the LiDAR around Angkor Wat and found this enormous city
Yes.
that was completely invisible, but it was centered on, what you would think is the downtown, which is the skyscrapers, but they were pyramids.
Yep.
Right? Custodians were worshipped by ancient Americans as human-like gods who hailed from other worlds. As in the Eastern Hemisphere, custodians in America were eventually disguised by cloaks of mythology. As in Egypt and Mesopotamia, custodial servants in America were the priests, who held considerable political power because of their special relationship to mankind's reported extraterrestrial masters. It is therefore not surprising to find evidence that the Brotherhood existed in the ancient Americas. For example, the snake was an important religious symbol throughout the ancient Western Hemisphere. Several Freemasonic historians claim evidence of early Masonic rites in pre-Columbian societies. Think about that. Masonic-looking rites in pre-Columbian societies.
Yep.
That's pretty fascinating right there.
Who's the guy we saw speak in Arkansas?
Which one?
On the
Scott Walter?
yes, Scott Walter.
Yeah.
Thank you. He does some work on this.
Yes, he does.
all
Yeah.
the Masonic rites in the amongst the Native American
Yeah.
tribes and stuff.
Yeah.
Pre-Columbian.
Right.
Cool stuff.
It's been here for a long time, and that's really interesting.
The other thing I was going to say is, like, we like to look at this. Imagine modern society, having some catastrophic event where we lose our we lose our history. It becomes oral tradition or whatever. You go into the future after this massive destruction of modern society and see, the thought experiment of what that might look like.
Yeah.
Well, the story about the Europeans coming to the quote-unquote New World could be misinterpreted in the future,
Yeah.
right? So just that idea, like they called it the New World. So beings came from other worlds.
Okay. I got what. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They didn't look anything like the beings that exist on that world.
Yeah, they might even think, they came from the earlier world, the new and the old.
That's right.
Yeah.
They came from the old world into the new, and they're like, we see this same kind of talking in
Yeah.
the old
Across
sun and
the
the new
waters.
sun. Yeah, old sun and the new sun.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they would think that, like, previous to, like, the Europeans coming over to the Americas, there was a cataclysm that destroyed them. Because that's how you come from the old world to the new one.
Right.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then, there'd be people like, this is just fairy tales,
Yeah.
Beings don't come from other worlds. Hey, we've just discovered an island out here. That,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay. For example, the snake was an important religious symbol throughout the ancient Western Hemisphere. Several Freemasonic historians claim evidence of early Masonic rites in pre-Columbian societies. The Brotherhood symbol of the swastika was also prominent. As Professor W. Norman Brown of the University of Pennsylvania points out on page 27 of his book, The Swastika, a study of the Nazi claims of its Aryan origin. Quote, "A curious problem lies in the presence of the swastika in America before the time of Columbus. It is frequent in northern, central, and southern America and has many variant forms." Unquote. According to Bramley, the swastika is an very ancient bad brotherhood symbol. And so he's kind of pointing out that it was also present in the Americas before, and it was pre-Columbian. But of course, this book that the book that he's quoting, the guy was studying the claims of Aryan origins and how he was studying the Nazi claims. But
Right.
Bramley's just like, look, the swastika was present in the Americas before the Columbus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The American civilizations had a history similar to that of the Old World. It was filled with wars and genocides and calamities. Cities and religious centers in ancient America came and went. One thing that remained consistent was the building of pyramids. The Toltecs, a civilization which arose from the Mayan society, continued the pyramid building tradition and constructed the fabulous Pyramid of the Sun in Mexico. This pyramid is larger than the Great Pyramid of Egypt in sheer bulk and is crafted with the same stone-cutting precision that characterizes its Egyptian counterpart. When the Spaniards invaded America in the 16th century, they deliberately destroyed nearly everything they could of the ancient American cultures, except for the gold and precious metals that were shipped to Spain, and a lot of times just lost, period. I always think of that. They put all these artifacts onto boats, and then the boat goes and just sinks.
Can be found.
Yeah, it's still there somewhere. At that time in history, the Inquisition was at its height, and Spain was its most zealous advocate. The ancient Americas were considered pagan, and so Christian missionaries engaged in an energetic campaign to destroy all records and artifacts related to the American religions. Unfortunately, those records included priceless history and science texts. The effect of this obliteration was much like the destruction of the Alexandria Library earlier. It created substantial blackout regarding some of mankind's ancient history. This has left a great many unanswered questions about the Mayans. For example, the Mayans built many fabulous religious centers and then abandoned them. Some historians believe that the abandonment was done suddenly and that its cause remains a mystery. Others conclude that it was done gradually as the Mayan society decayed. The Mayans were also known to practice human sacrifice. Some historians believe that the sacrifices were an infrequent ritual. Others think that the sacrifices amounted to full-scale genocide, claiming 50,000 lives per year. And where does the truth lie? And I guess he's saying that these questions we have is because the records were all destroyed.
That part of the history are always just, I just can't stand it.
Yeah.
They burned all that stuff and
Yeah.
just destroyed. Ugh.
Yeah, just piles of it and set it on
Maddening.
fire. Yeah.
Burn it. Change the narrative.
Yep.
One book has surfaced which purports to be a record of the ancient Mayan beliefs. It is known as the Popol Vuh, or Council Book. It is not a genuinely ancient work. It was first written in the 16th century by an unknown Mayan. It was later translated into Spanish by Father Francisco Ximenez of the Dominican Order. This translation was first published in Vienna in 1857, and it remains the earliest surviving version of this book. The Popol Vuh is said to be a collection of Mayan beliefs and legends as they had been passed down orally through the centuries. It is clear, however, that many Christian ideas were incorporated into the work, either by the original unknown Mayan author or by Father Ximenez or both. It is also obvious that the Popol Vuh contains many tales of pure fiction mixed in with what is said to be the true story of the creation of man. Nevertheless, several segments of the Popol Vuh are worth considering because they repeat important religious and historical themes that we have seen elsewhere, but with far greater sophistication than is found in Christian writings. Those themes are expressed by the Popol Vuh within the context of the multiple gods of this ancient Maya. The Popol Vuh states that mankind had been created as to be a servant of the gods. The gods are quoted, quote, "Let us make him who shall nourish and sustain us. What shall we do to be invoked in order to be remembered on earth? We have already tried with our first creations, our first creatures, but we could not make them praise and venerate us. So then, let us try to make obedient, respectful beings who will nourish and sustain us," unquote, from the Popol Vuh. According to the Popol Vuh, the gods had made creatures known as, quote, "figures of wood," unquote, before creating Homo sapiens. Said to look and talk like men, these odd creatures of wood existed and multiplied. They had daughters and they had sons. They were, however, inadequate servants for the gods. To explain why, the Popol Vuh expresses a sophisticated spiritual truth not found in Christianity, but which is found in earlier Mesopotamian writings. The figures of wood did not have souls, relates the Popol Vuh, and so they walked on all fours aimlessly. In other words, without souls or spiritual beings to animate the bodies, the gods found that they had created living creatures which could biologically reproduce, but which lacked the intelligence to have goals or direction. The gods destroyed their figures of wood and held lengthy meetings to determine the shape and composition of their next attempt. The gods finally produced creatures to which spiritual beings could be attached. That new and improved creature was Homo sapiens. Footnote here, according to Sumerian text, Homo sapiens resembled custodial bodies. This may explain why the gods of the Popol Vuh was successful with Homo sapiens, but not with other types of bodies. Spiritual beings were more willing to inhabit bodies which resembled those they had already inhabited before. Okay. Creating Homo sapiens did not end custodial headaches, however. According to the Popol Vuh, the first Homo sapiens were too intelligent and had too many abilities. Quote, "The first men were endowed with intelligence. They saw, and instantly they could see far. They succeeded in seeing. They succeeded in knowing all that there is in the world. When they looked, instantly they saw all around them, and they contemplated in turn the arch of heaven and the round face of the earth. But the Creator and the Maker did not hear this with pleasure. It is not well that our creatures, our works, they know all, the large and small, they said." Unquote. Something had to be done. Humans, and by implication the spiritual beings that animate human bodies, needed to have their level of intelligence reduced. Mankind had to be made more stupid. Quote, "What shall we do with them now? Let their sight reach only to that which is near. Let them see only a little of the face of the earth. It is not well what they say. Perchance are they not by nature simple creatures of our making? Must they also be gods?" Unquote. I mean, this is sounding very familiar, right? They will become as us.
Yep.
Nothing shall be withheld from them.
Yeah.
The Popol Vuh then tells in symbolism what custodians did to early Homo sapiens to reduce human intelligence and intellectual vision. Quote, "Then the heart of heaven blew mist into their eyes, which clouded their sight as when a mirror is breathed upon. Their eyes were covered, and they could see only what was close. Only that was clear to them. In this way, the wisdom and all the knowledge of the first men were destroyed." Unquote. The above passage echoes the biblical Adam and Eve story, in which revolving swords have been placed to block human access to important knowledge. It also suggests a custodial intention that human beings should never learn about the world beyond the obvious and superficial. The Popol Vuh contains another element worth mentioning because it reflects the muddling of languages theme of the biblical Tower of Babel story. The Popol Vuh relates that various gods spoke different languages, which the ancient Mayan tribes were compelled to adopt whenever they fell under the rule of a new god. Even in the New World, humans were broken into different linguistic groups by the custodial gods. By the time the Spaniards first landed in the Americas in the late 15th century, the custodial gods were no longer directly visible in human affairs and had not been for many centuries. Although UFOs continued to be observed around the world, people no longer viewed them as the vehicles of the gods. The custodial race assumed a low profile, which made it seem as though they had left the Earth and gone home. Unfortunately, they still remained, as the next and perhaps most ominous chapter reveals. Black Death.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's really interesting, though, the Popol Vuh. But I mean,
Yeah.
I guess this guy wrote it in the 16th century or whatever, but
Yeah, a Mayan wrote it in 16th century, and then it was translated, and the translation, I guess, is all we've got. Or at least that's what he was saying.
right. So either he didn't say that the other possibility was that these stories were just the same.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
they all came from a common source.
Right.
It was interesting, too, that he mentioned the round face of the earth.
Yeah.
But I guess that was after 1492, so...
Right. That's true.
Had they figured out that it was round just because he got to the East Coast?
I mean, it's flat, but it's round.
Oh, yeah, that's true. It's flat and round. That's right. I didn't think of it that way. It's two-dimensional round.
Right.
All right. Break time.
Cuties.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the final segment of the final hour, Brothers of the Serpent podcast, Gods of Eden, part 5. Thank you.
Black Death coming up.
Black Death coming up, doing it for Grandma.
We need to come up with this game, the Olmec coin toss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, we should invent rules and,
Yep.
you know. This can end civilizations, guys. This is a serious deal.
You can play it at family reunions.
Who's playing the Olmecs? That's what you need to ask. The next time you do a coin toss, you're like, all right, who's the Olmecs?
That's right.
Yep.
Who's picking heads?
Who are the tails, Watcher? You can figure that out while we're moving on with the book.
All right. Chapter 18 of William Bramley's The Gods of Eden, The Black Death. The centralization of papal power culminated under Pope Innocent IV, who held the papal reigns from 1243 until 1254. Innocent IV attempted to turn the papacy into the world's highest political authority by proclaiming that the Pope was the vicar of the Creator, to whom every creature is subjected. It was under Innocent IV that the Inquisition was made an official institution of the Roman Catholic Church. Despite the oppression of the Inquisition, Europe in the 13th century was beginning to recover from the economic and social disruption caused by the Crusades. Signs of a European Renaissance were visible in the widening of intellectual and artistic horizons. Trade with other parts of the world did much to enrich European life. Europe was entering an era in which chivalry, music, art, and spiritual values were playing greater roles. Hardly a century of this progress had passed, however, before a disastrous event abruptly brought it to a temporary halt. That event was the Bubonic Plague, also known as the Black Death. The Black Death began in Asia and soon spread to Europe, where it killed well over 25 million people, or about 1/3 of Europe's total population, in less than 4 years. Some historians put the casualty figure closer to 35 to 40 million people, or about half of all Europeans.
Yeah, census counts weren't that great back then.
Right. The epidemic first spread through Europe between 1347 and 1350. The Bubonic Plague continued to strike Europe with decreasing fatality every 10 or 20 years in short-lived outbreaks all the way up to the 1700s. Although it is difficult to calculate the total number of deaths from that 400-year period, it is believed that over 100 million people may have died from this plague. 2 types of plagues are believed to have caused the Black Death. The first is the bubonic type, which was the most common. The bubonic form of plague is characterized by swellings in the lymph nodes, and the swellings are called buboes. These are accompanied by vomiting, fever, and death within several days if not treated. This form of plague is not contagious between human beings. It requires an active carrier such as a flea. For this reason, many historians believe that flea-infested rodents caused the bubonic plague. Rodents are known to carry the disease even today. A number of records from between 1347 and the late 1600s speak of rodent infestations prior to several outbreaks of the Black Death, lending credence to this story, or to the rodent theory. The second form of plague contributing to the Black Death is a highly contagious type known as Pneumonic Plague. It is marked by shivering, rapid breathing, and the coughing up of blood. Body temperatures are high, and death normally follows 3 to 4 days after the disease has been contracted. This second type of plague is nearly always fatal and transmits best in cold weather and in poor ventilation. Some physicians today believe that it was this second form, the Pneumonic Plague, which was responsible for most of the casualties of the Black Death because of the crowding and poor hygienic conditions then prevalent in Europe. We would normally shake our heads at this tragic period of human history and be thankful that modern medicine has developed cures for these dread diseases. However, troubling enigmas about the Black Death still linger. Many outbreaks occurred in summer during warm weather in uncrowded regions. Not all outbreaks of bubonic plague were preceded by rodent infestation. In fact, only a minority of cases seem to be related to an increase in the presence of vermin. The greatest puzzle about Black Death is how it was able to strike isolated human populations which had no contact with earlier infected areas. The epidemics also tended to end abruptly. So again, we were thinking of, stuff from the sky here.
Infall, yeah.
Yeah.
But also, isn't this around the same time as the Little Ice Age, the Maunder Minimum?
Oh, yeah. 1347 was, and 1350 was when it first spread through Europe, but continued all the way up until the 1700s.
Yeah. So it encompassed that time period.
Yeah. To solve these puzzles, an historian would normally look to records from the plague years to see what people were reporting. When he does so, he encounters stories so stunning and unbelievable that he is likely to reject them as fantasies and superstitions of badly frightened minds. A great many people throughout Europe and other plague-stricken regions of the world were reporting that outbreaks of the plague were caused by foul-smelling mists. Those mists frequently appeared after unusually bright lights in the sky. Yeah. The historian quickly discovers that mists and bright lights were reported far more frequently and in many more locations than were rodent infestations. The plague years were in fact a period of heavy UFO activity. So what then were these mysterious mists? There is another very important way in which plague germs can be transmitted, through germ weapons. The United States and the Soviet Union have stockpiles of biological weapons containing bubonic plague and other epidemic diseases. The germs are kept alive in canisters which spray the diseases into the air on thick, often visible, artificial mist. Anyone breathing in the mist will inhale the disease. There are enough such germ weapons today to wipe out a good portion of humanity. Reports of identical disease-inducing mists from the plague years strongly suggest that the Black Death was caused by germ warfare. Let us take a look at the incredible reports which lead to that conclusion.
Okay, so the Little Ice Age began around 1300.
Yep, there you go.
Because I remember this. It's like Randall often mentions that. It's like you have this, astronomical phenomenon take place that causes extremely cold winters, crop failure, and right then you start getting, you have everybody's immune system is weakened because there's crop failure, there's less food, there's famine, and then this plague comes in and just wipes everybody out.
And then the question then becomes, well, what caused the Little Ice Age? Because when you read accounts then, they talk about the dimming of the sun and about how it was barely visible during the day, or it was like a dark orange. And so you start thinking of particulates in the sky that are blocking it.
Yeah.
And if that's an infall of stuff, cosmic material, so then the Little Ice Age, the Little Ice Age and the Black Death are caused by the same cloud of biological material and other cosmic stuff falling in from space.
Whoa.
And the question then,
then that could also explain lights in the skies, UFO activity.
Yeah.
Not saying it wasn't aliens, UFO people. Just, we're looking at all the options here.
Yeah, well, it's probably aliens, though. UFO.
And then the question I always ask is, where is that? It probably was aliens, UFO people. The question I want to know is, where is that cloud now? If we pass through this cloud of material, where is it? Is it something that the whole solar system moved through? And so it's...
Well, from 1300 to 1870, so it's like hundreds of years.
Right. Yeah.
500 and something years of passing through something, so...
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
So maybe part of the local bubble.
But due to, let's say this bubble of material, we'd been in it for so long, but as like Dr. Wickramasinghe is saying, that the solar wind is actually
pushing it away,
also shielding us from these actual materials as opposed to just cosmic rays and such. So it's like heightened solar activity is like while we're passing through this bubble of this cloud of stuff, prevents it from coming in large amounts, and then we have the Maunder minimum.
Right.
And for the next 500 years, it's just like there's we go through thick and thin areas of it.
Yeah. Yep. Wow.
It's crazy.
There's another very important way, and okay, I sorry I read that. The first outbreak. Yeah, I know, I saw that.
Sorry, I had to type like the question to the watcher because I didn't get the answer when I was like,
Yeah.
and he's like, sorry, I've been trying to find out who was the enemy of the Olmecs
Right.
all this time.
So he can know who picks tails.
Who was tails? Jeez. Thanks, watcher.
The first outbreak of the plague in Europe followed an unusual series of events. Between 1298 and 1314, 7 large comets were seen over Europe. One was of, quote, awe-inspiring blackness, unquote, which is a little strange for a comet.
That is.
1 year before the first outbreak of the epidemic in Europe, a column of fire was reported over the Pope's palace at Avignon in France. And he has a footnote here. This was a second unauthorized pope who assumed the title as the result of a schism in the Catholic Church. So it was like a different pope at a palace in Avignon. Earlier that year, a ball of fire was observed over Paris. It reportedly remained visible to observers for some time. To the people of Europe, these sightings were considered omens of the plague, which soon followed. So like a ball of fire, you'd think, okay, so we got a bolide. But if it's there for a couple of hours, you're like, all right, what's happening?
Yeah, that's more like a comet.
Yeah, but it's a ball of fire if it's in the atmosphere.
Well, I mean, if it was a cometary object that had, just like this one recently, that was totally not visible but very close, and then suddenly explodes with all this, outgassing, and you can see it during the day, and it's there for a long period of time. Yeah.
It just seems like it would look more like a star than a ball of fire. I don't know.
Yeah.
A ball of fire is more specific, like you see a bright light in the sky, even if it gets really bright, it's still kind of I don't know, calling it a ball of fire seems specific.
Okay.
But maybe you're right. I don't know.
They're just coming up with script-hard answers.
Yeah. Clearly it was a comet and just blew up. Way out in space.
What? Ask the Electric Universe. Sorry. Keep going.
Why can't a UFO just be parked up there for a couple hours?
It could be.
Right, yeah, that's his point.
Yeah, you're right.
Okay.
You are right.
Totally right.
All right.
And that's a legit question. I'm not trying to say it wasn't. I'm just also looking for
other way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
He's just doing his job.
I'm doing my job.
And
His
I guess what's really happening is I believe in aliens.
Yeah. Well, hey, we totally believe in aliens.
I guess that's what's happening over here.
Okay, let's not have a UFO versus comets fight.
We're not going to do that.
Not on the show. We can do that after we're done.
Okay.
It is true that some reported comets were probably just that, comets. Some may also have been small meteors or fireballs. Centuries ago, people were generally far more superstitious than they are today, and so natural meteors and similar prosaic phenomena were often reported as precursors to later disasters, even though there was no real-life connection. On the other hand, it is important to note that almost any unusual object in the sky was called a comet.
Fair enough.
Yeah. A good example is found in a best-selling book published in 1557, A Chronicle of Prodigies and Portents, by Conrad Lacothsines. On page 494 of his book, we read of a comet observed in the year 1479. Quote, "A comet was seen in Arabia in the manner of a sharply pointed wooden beam," unquote.
Okay.
The accompanying illustration, which was based on eyewitness descriptions, shows what clearly looks like the front half of what looks like a rocket ship among some clouds. This object appears to have many portholes. Today we would call this object a UFO, not a comet. This leads us to wonder how many other ancient comets were actually similar rocket-like objects. When we are confronted with an old report of a comet, we therefore do not really know what kind of thing we are dealing with unless there is a fuller description. A report of a sudden increase in quote-unquote comets or similar celestial phenomena may in fact mean an increase in UFO activity. And he has a footnote here. The complete title of that guy's book, where he got that quote from, is A Chronicle of Prodigies and Portents that have occurred beyond the right order, an operation of working of nature in both the upper and lower regions of the earth from the beginning of the world up into these present times. That's the name of the book. What's the deal with these long names and these people? Scientists are always the same. You read the name of like hip papers today, and they're still like that.
I know.
Incredibly long. Okay, the link between unusual aerial phenomena and the Black Death was established immediately during the first outbreak of the plague in Asia. As one historian tells us, quote, "The first reports of the plague came out of the East. They were confused, exaggerated, frightening, as reports from that quarter of the world so often are. Descriptions of storms and earthquakes, of meteors and comets trailing noxious gases that killed trees and destroyed the fertility of the land," unquote.
Yeah, now that
Yeah.
is, that's something else.
The above passage indicates that strange flying objects were doing more than just spreading disease. They were also apparently spraying chemical or biological defoliants from the air. The above passage echoes the ancient Mesopotamian tablets, which describe defoliation of the landscape by ancient custodial gods. Many human casualties from the Black Death may have been caused by such defoliants. The connection between aerial phenomena and plague had begun centuries before the Black Death. We saw examples in our earlier discussion of Justinian's plague. We read from another source about a large plague that had reportedly broken out in the year 1117, almost 250 years before the Black Death. That plague was also preceded by unusual celestial phenomena. Quote, "In 1117, in January, a comet passed like a fiery army from the north towards the orient. The moon was overcast, blood red in an eclipse. A year later, a light appeared more brilliant than the sun. This was followed by great cold, then famine and plague, of which 1/3 of humanity is said to have perished," unquote. And he has a footnote on this, too. He says, "I have seen no mention of this plague in any other history book. It may have been a local plague which destroyed not 1/3 of humanity, but 1/3 of the afflicted population." Once the medieval Black Death got started, noteworthy aerial phenomena continued to accompany the dread epidemic. Reports of many of these phenomena were assembled by Johann Knoll and published in his book, The Black Death, A Chronicle of the Plague, 1926. According to Mr. Knoll, at least 26 quote-unquote comets were reported between 1500 and 1543. 15 or 16 were seen between 1556 and 1597. In the year 1618, 8 or 9 were observed in that year. That's a lot. That's a lot of comets in one year.
Yeah.
Mr. Knoll emphasizes the connection which people perceived between the comets and the subsequent epidemics. Quote, "In the year 1606, a comet was seen, after which a general plague traversed the world. In 1582, a comet brought so violent a plague upon Prague and Thuringia, the Netherlands, and other places that in Thuringia it carried off 37,000 people, and in the Netherlands, 46,415, unquote. From Vienna, Austria, we get the following description of an event which happened in 1568. Here we see a connection between an outbreak of plague and an object described in a manner remarkably similar to a modern cigar or beam-shaped UFO. Quote, "When in sun and moonlight, a beautiful rainbow and a fiery beam were seen hovering above the church of St. Stephanie, which was followed by a violent epidemic in Austria, Swabia, Augsburg, Württemberg, Nuremberg, and other places, carrying off human beings and cattle," unquote. That's the other weird thing, is like the plague is killing the cattle. You know,
Well, if it's defoliating everything, the cattle will die.
right. Yeah, in other words, what I'm saying is it's not a kind of normal disease, doesn't kill livestock as well as people, usually. You know, I mean, sometimes I guess you can, but if a person can get sick from something, it usually doesn't make the animals sick. They're too different, usually.
Right, yeah, yeah. But if
If it's a poison or a defoliant, yeah.
Going back to the infall thing, though,
It can be a mix of stuff.
a lot of stuff,
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I was also asking the watcher about, because the defoliant made me think, like, you know, could a comet have basically
Defoliant stuff in it.
like fertilizer?
Yeah.
You know, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium.
Yeah.
And so, like, you get like, tons of nitrogen falling, or phosphorus or something, which could be red
And it burns stuff.
in
Yeah.
the sky. And so then it just kills all the plants because it's just over fertilization.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't know.
That's a good point.
And it would make people sick,
Yeah.
probably, if you're breathing it in.
Could also be it doesn't mean that it wasn't aliens dumping that fertilizer.
Yeah, or throwing those comets at us.
That's true.
Yeah.
Sightings of unusual aerial phenomena usually occurred from several minutes to a year before an outbreak of plague. When there was a gap of between such a sighting and the arrival, a second phenomena was sometimes reported: the appearance of frightening human-like figures dressed in black. These figures were often seen on the outskirts of a town or village, and their presence would signal the outbreak of an epidemic almost immediately. A summary written in 1682 tells of one such visit a century earlier. In Brandenburg in Germany, there appeared in 1559 horrible men, of whom at first 15 and later on 12 were seen. The foremost had beside their posteriors little heads, and the others fearful faces and long sides, with which they would cut at the oats, so that the swish could be heard at great distance, but the oats remained standing. When a quantity of people came running out to see them, they went on with their mowing." Unquote. The visit of the strange men to the oat fields was followed immediately by a severe outbreak of the plague in Brandenburg. This incident raises intriguing questions. Who were these mysterious figures? What were the long scythe-like instruments that they held that emitted a loud swishing sound? It appears that the scythes may have been long instruments designed to spray poison or germ-laden gas. This would mean that the townspeople misinterpreted the movement of the scythes as an attempt to cut oats, when in fact the movements were the act of spraying aerosols on the crops. Similar men dressed in black were reported in Hungary. Quote, "In the year of Christ, 1571, was seen at Krimitz in the mountain towns of Hungary on Ascension Day in the evening, to the great perturbation and disturbance of all, when on the Schulzerberg there appeared so many black riders that the opinion was prevalent that the Turks were making a secret raid, but who rapidly disappeared again, and thereupon after a raging plague broke out in the neighborhood."
Yeah, that's
Yeah. Strange men dressed in black, demons, and other terrifying figures were observed in other European communities. These frightening creatures were often observed carrying long brooms or scythes or swords that were used to sweep or knock at the doors of people's homes, and the inhabitants of those homes fell ill with the plague afterwards.
and had strange horns coming out of their heads.
Yeah.
Or cut off. Like you imagine any kind of gas mask.
Right.
Looking like you've got those pipes or something, if it's a pressure suit.
Right.
Looking like horns coming out of your head.
Yeah.
Or the filters would look like.
That's what I was thinking right here. It said that the foremost had beside their posteriors little heads.
That's right.
Yeah.
Little heads.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or another gas mask clipped onto your
Yeah.
belt, because it's by their, he's saying it's by their back, the posterior,
okay.
their butt, right? So you got this other gas mask right here, and it looks like a little head to you if you don't know what those are.
Yeah. It's your backup gas mask?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're
something.
wearing one and they also have one.
Yeah.
A buddy breather.
Right. It's freaking wild, isn't
We're
it?
all looking at Lars.
Like,
Just like,
we're all gonna die. Okay. The inhabitants of those homes fell ill with plague afterwards. It is from these reports that people created the popular image of death as a skeleton or a demon carrying a scythe.
no face.
Yeah.
Just dark hood.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you think, they felt they were sized like they were trying to cut the oats, but they're just walking through.
Yeah, spraying.
Yeah. Spraying something
And now
onto
it's
the
a
crops.
popular Halloween costume.
Huh?
And now it's a popular Halloween
Yeah, it's
costume.
associated with death because, and the scythe is whole, he's coming to cut the human souls out or whatever, but no, they were spraying death.
I mean, everybody's been walking around in Halloween costumes lately.
Yeah.
The scythe came to symbolize the act of death mowing down people like stalks of grain. And looking at this haunting image of death, we may, in fact, be staring into the face of the UFO. Of all the phenomena connected to the Black Death, by far the most frequently reported were the strange, noxious mists. The vapors were often observed even when the other phenomena were not. Mr. Knoll points out that moist pestilential fogs were, quote, a feature which preceded the epidemic throughout its whole course, unquote. A great many physicians of the time took it for granted that the strange mists caused the plague. This connection was established at the very beginning of the Black Death, as Mr. Knoll tells us. Quote, the origin of the plague lay in China. There it is said to have commenced to rage already in the year 1333, after a terrible mist emitting a fearful stench and infecting the air, unquote.
Oh,
Yeah.
There's
That
the
just freaked me
plague
out.
doctors. Yep.
Watcher just posted a picture.
Wearing the mask of Thoth. That's what that is, that long beak.
Yeah.
I love the hat, though. The hat is awesome. But, and so the idea that these people had that it was this mist that caused the plague or whatever, and that's kind of poo-pooed now because we're like, we know about bacteria and viruses or whatever, but those aren't mutually exclusive.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of what Bramley's trying to point out. Just because we know that like what actually causes the plague are these little microbes or these little molecules that are alive like viruses, doesn't mean that the mists didn't cause the plague, right?
Yes.
That they're not mutually exclusive. And it is weird, like why would, it's the other thing that they do, the Scriptars do, of course, is they're like, well, those people were just terrified and they're making things up.
Especially if like we are talking about cosmic debris.
Yeah.
And something that could come like land onto the planet and wipe out the foliage could also have chemical reactions in the soil which cause like aerosolization
Yeah.
of
Yeah, it causes miasma, which is the name of the mist that they use. Like,
yeah, so like these mists come and they're carrying whatever
yeah.
toxins or
Yep.
whatever it is.
So you're saying that the mist may be a secondary effect that didn't necessarily carry the plague, but they're still associated with it.
So like if you have this infall like of stuff in this area,
yeah.
and then it's got a whole amalgam of
Yeah.
things, right? Amalgamation of stuff, viruses, whatever that can affect humans, things that can affect animals, chemicals and other things.
Yeah.
And it creates mist in and
Yeah.
of itself, right?
Yeah.
Whatever it's doing and creates these thick gases that are blown into towns.
Yeah, and it stink. Like that's the other thing is like they say terrible mists emitting a fearful stench.
And the Watcher says respiratory viruses are carried in liquid. That's what a droplet is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. He's making good points.
Yeah, he's got some good points over here. The mad cow disease.
Yeah.
I don't know how to say that. Spongioform encephalopathy.
Encephalopathy.
The cow is sickened, and then eating the cow sickens the people.
Oh, because you don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, I see.
Right, but those are rare, is what I'm saying. Or the animal carries it but doesn't get hurt by it, and the person eats it and it's deadly to the person.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep, another point. East coast of Africa has dust that falls in the U.S.
Yep.
I have seen yellow mists rise from cedar trees, and they have made me sick.
True.
We can call that miasma from now on. The miasma's coming.
I'm serious, man. Like the other day when we were at the orchard, we're working out there, and I was up on the hill.
Yeah, I remember this.
And the wind just suddenly just picks up.
Yeah.
And I'm looking out over this, vast valley.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just seeing these yellow clouds, like the trees start whipping around and these
Right,
massive yellow clouds
start pouring
off of them.
And then the sky turns.
The whole sky just
Yeah.
like it changes color and it's like, dude. And then, we're all like,
Yeah. Yep. I just think it's interesting. Like, this is very nerdy, but in the Final Fantasy RPG games, the poison sickness spells that you can cast on the enemies is called miasma. It's like the miasma series, and it's based on this plague idea, right? You cast it, and it's all this like foggy mist that's green or whatever, and then after that, the enemies are like dying slowly. Miasma.
Hey, we love nerds.
the Watcher just watched himself, the west coast of Africa.
Oh yeah.
Watch yourself, watch you.
Watch yourself. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, okay. So another account stresses that the plague did not spread from person to person, but was contracted by breathing the deadly, stinking air. Quote, during the whole of the year 1382, there was no wind, in consequence of which the air grew putrid, so that an epidemic broke out, and the plague did not pass from one man to another, but everyone who was killed by it got it straight from the air. Unquote. Reports of deadly mists and pestilential fogs came from all plague-infested parts of the world. Unquote. A Prague chronicle describes the epidemic in China, India, and Persia, and the Florentine historian Matteo Villani, who took up the work of his brother Giovanni after he had died of the plague in Florence, relays the account of earthquakes and pestilential fogs from a traveler in Asia. Unquote. And this same historian continues, quote, a similar incident of earthquake and pestilential fog was reported from Cyprus, and it was believed that the wind had been so poisonous that men were struck down and died from it. And he adds, German accounts speak of a heavy, vile-smelling mist which advanced from the east and spread itself all over Italy, unquote. And that author states that in other countries, quote, people were convinced that they could contract the disease from the stench, or even, as is sometimes described, they could actually see the plague coming through the streets as a pale fog, unquote. And he summarizes rather dramatically, quote, the earth itself seemed in a state of convulsion, shuddering and spitting, putting forth heavy poisonous winds that destroyed animals and plants and called swarms of insects to life to complete the destructions, unquote. Similar happenings are echoed by other writers. A journal from 1680 reported this odd incident, quote, that between Eisenberg and Nuremberg, 30 funeral biers or casket stands, all covered with black cloth, were seen in broad daylight. And among them on a bier, a black man was standing with a white cross. When these had disappeared, a great heat set in so that the people in the place could hardly stand it. But when the sun had set, they perceived so sweet a perfume as if they were in a garden of roses. By this time, they were all plunged into perturbation, whereupon the epidemic set in Thuringia in many places, unquote. That's a weird story.
Yeah. It seems to me you can't separate this from the fires.
Right.
Like this, it's so, I don't know, just all, like the whole idea reminds me of the fires, you know, the accounts.
Yeah.
Like it just pours in from the sky or just rolls over the entire city like a,
Yeah.
you know, the mist,
Right.
Yeah.
but it's a fire instead.
Yeah, there's more and more of this, all these accounts. He's got tons of it. So we'll have to get to that next week.
You all right?
Yeah.
Great show.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it.
The Black Death.
The Black Death.
Caused by aliens.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I knew it was going to
Yeah.
hit me with something, but I didn't know it was going to hit me with all that.
Well, I have always, well, since reading the book the first time, the idea, you know, that this picture of death coming from these reports of men walking through the fields waving stuff, and then everybody starts dying after that. I'm like, okay, what is
Yeah.
going on?
Yeah.
What?
The old Black Death.
Yep.
Yeah,
I'll
and
be
again,
pondering on that.
I'm trying to point out like the weird cosmic stuff, but it doesn't. I'm not saying that's what it was.
Yeah, no, I think
just-
I think that a lot of it, I look at it and I'm like, it's possible that it's any of these things.
I'm just looking at it through these eyes now.
Yeah.
Like I didn't have nearly the
Right.
You know, the I guess
And your eyes are older
Knowledge
than
or
my
something.
eyes. My eyes are
Learning.
still baby eyes.
Baby eyes.
I have baby eyes.
Cow eyes.
I have baby cloudy eyes, and I'm looking at Black Death like, oh no, aliens. I'll come back.
Nothing wrong with that.
I'll come back months and months later, and I'll be like, okay.
Yeah.
My eyes are older now.
Well, I don't know. I'm just saying that
We're not
It's-
discounting it. It's just that there's more possibilities now.
Yeah.
There's more possibilities, but obviously aliens.
it's fun to look through, like
No,
you know,
it's
look through the
fun.
different
Yeah,
the
it's
different
fun.
possibilities. So yeah.
You need sucralose hair.
Yeah, you
to
need to
say
have the
that.
hair next time.
You're like, look, guys, aliens.
What's that?
Giorgio Tsoukalos.
Oh, yeah.
From Ancient Aliens.
Yeah.
You need to have, because you're over here doing the alien shit. You just need to have the hair.
Yeah,
You can be like,
I really
aliens.
do feel like that right now. Yeah.
That's cool.
all right. Hope you guys enjoyed that show. Part 5 of The Gods of Eden. You can get a hold of us, brothersoftheserpent at gmail.com. Go to the website, brothersoftheserpent.com. Check out the encyclopedia and the glossary. Check out the SnakeSkins. Buy a t-shirt. Help us out with the pyramid scheme. Join the Patreon or give us a one-time donation through PayPal. The links are right there on the website. Also, give us reviews, which we read on the show, even if you're a mad grandma. Yeah, there you go. There's Tsoukalos.
Yeah, there we go.
Share the shows wherever you can. Follow us on Twitter at SnakeBros SNKBRS. Join the Facebook group, which is run by Jordan. Join the Discord chat, which I really recommend everybody does. I saw Roddy the Mammal joined in.
All right.
Yeah, Roddy the
I'm
Mammal's
gonna
in there.
join.
Laura
I'm
says
coming.
Laura's
I'm coming
threatening
in.
to join. We got a lot of the usual suspects you guys hear in the emails are in the Discord. So if you want to talk to the emailers or us, join up. Also, the Library of the Serpent, which is run by Jeff. He has lots of books and other publicly available documents in the library that we talk about on the show, and then a list of links to be able to buy the stuff that's not publicly available, so you can buy the books from the authors, like The Gods of Eden, for example. And he also runs the Discord chat, and I want to say thanks to all the other admins, Matt and Ryan and Brandon and Levi. All you guys are great. Thank you so much. You help a lot with kicking out the assholes, which has never happened. It's never happened. But I do say that Jeff runs a place with an iron fist. He says there's no evidence of any iron fist, but
We appreciate the iron.
yeah, it's there. Trust me. And he will smash you with it. Don't forget History Shift, who also makes our YouTube videos. So he also he's like I just said, Brandon. He's an admin in the chats, but he also makes all the YouTube videos. So you can follow him on Twitter at History Shift or find him on YouTube. History Shift is his channel. And Pod Doodles, who makes doodles of our podcasts and posts them on YouTube. So you can follow him on Twitter and find him on YouTube. Don't forget about Cosmographia, the podcast we make with Randall Carlson. Don't forget about our Reddit subreddit group, r/Brothers of the Serpent. Give us upvotes there. Upvotes help spread the podcast as well. And what about the Scabland strip? We're still waiting for people to sign up for the second possible week.
Yeah.
So if you want to go, there's still a chance. Tell Darren, go to contactthecabin.com and tell Darren you want to go to the Scabland strip, and we're getting close to having enough people to have a second week. So sign up if you want to go. It would be great. And thanks to Where Did the Road Go, Uncharted X, Mike and Maurice's Mind Escape, the C Word Podcast, Grimerica, Conspiranormal, and the Cosmic Tusk. Thank you guys so much.
Yeah,
we appreciate
thanks.
everything. And all of you listeners, this is our favorite time of the week. No matter what day of the week it is on, is our favorite day. So,
Mine too.
That's right.
yeah. All right. We love you guys.
Always have.
I always will.
Good night, Adamu.
Get back to work.
Counties.